We're good? All right, we're going to call to order the Sherwood Planning Commission meeting for May 27th, 2014. A roll call.
Chair Simpson.
Here.
Commissioner Clifford.
Here.
Commissioner Griffin.
Here.
Commissioner Walker.
Here.
Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
And let the record show that Commissioners Cook and Vice Chair Kopfer are absent.
Thank you very much. Agenda review. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda, which contains 5 sets of minutes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was not particularly wonderful with our huge packet.
Well, you don't have to pass them tonight.
So I submitted Scrivener errors that don't change the content of any of the documents, and I would like to recommend one change to the February 11th minutes on page 22. I asked for other testimony, and there was none, and I wanted the record to reflect that Mr. Tiemann declined rebuttal or further testimony within the time he had remaining. And I have it written down if you would like to. Yes, and the purpose for adding that is that as the applicant, he had an opportunity for rebuttal, and he elected not to do that. So it wasn't just so. That is the only change I have for those 5 sets of minutes. Does anybody else have any other substantive changes?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Is this one work?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. In the February 11th, I was present, as noted in the conversations that I had, but at the end, it is indicated that I am absent, which I believe it should have been Lisa Walker. I was looking at who was absent, and I think Lisa Walker and Cook.
Oh, yeah, it says
Yeah,
Clifford and Cook.
Beth Cook
Walker
were
and
absent.
Cook.
I also have another. There was, I believe, a question was left out on
Did you catch the
page
Scrivener error?
23 of that same.
Did you get the Scrivener error?
On the top, there's a comment. Brad commented
The date
regarding
being
the planter strips, and I believe he was referring to a question I had regarding the sidewalks, whether they were curb tight or if there was a parking strip. I believe. Now, you may have to look in on that, but I think I may have asked the question. Now, again, I can't confirm that, but I'm thinking I did. But I couldn't see that question in here. So
I can change that to Brad responded to Commissioner Clifford's questions.
that's
That
fine.
work?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh.
And I just had one thing on the April 8th minute, or page 30 of this consent agenda. Those should be dated May 8th instead of April 8th, I believe. The top of the page. Or May 13th, I mean.
13th. Thank you. That was part of the Scrivener's errors that I submitted earlier today.
Yes, and I got those.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other corrections, additions, or previously submitted Scrivener errors? Then do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Let the record show that Beth Cook has arrived. Council liaison announcements. We do not have a representative, so moving forward to staff announcements.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson. Just a couple here. On the 15th was a very busy day for us. We had the Local Trails Advisory Committee met upstairs, and I was hoping that Commissioner Clifford might be able to speak about his experience there. I guess it was pretty well attended, and they had a presentation from a gentleman at Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation, and Commissioner Clifford is our liaison on there.
It was a very good turnout, and yes, we did. We had a number of, not a number, but a few speakers, mainly the Parks and Rec representative who gave, I think he had more, he was hoping to fulfill us with more information than time allowed. So he was very passionate about what he does and the positive outcome of the whole Parks and Rec, Tualatin Parks and Rec, and he's very looking forward to what will be part of Sherwood's trail system, and was open to any questions that anybody asked, and he was very informative and answered most of our questions, and then we went around and introduced. Well, actually, prior to his discussion, we all introduced ourselves and then opened it up for questions, and I think it was overall it was a good meeting.
Perfect. Also, that same night, DEQ held a meeting and released their findings on the Ken Foster Farm site. Here's their findings. We're going to put this copy down in the library if anybody wants to look at it tomorrow. And Commissioner Walker and Julia were both there. I don't know if you want to say a few words about what you thought was the outcome of that meeting. I didn't stay for the whole thing.
It is an ongoing process that it was meant to be a general meeting for the community as opposed to individual property owners that also attended, to kind of let people know that basically the process is still ongoing and on hold a little further. The DEQ, actually I guess the EPA has changed, is in the process of possibly changing some of the threshold levels of what's acceptable, which they're not saying if that threshold level will go up or down depending for the chromium levels. So we're kind of, I think, probably about a year away from knowing what's going on there still.
And I think I had heard that a lot of what they found were concentrated in certain areas, and in that water. And there are two different types of chromium that are actually on the site.
It was educational for the people who aren't involved in it. I happen to be a property owner there, so I know some of that already. But it is a complicated thing, and it's a continuing process that I don't know when the answer is going to come.
So again, this will be
Well, I was going to agree with that. It is very complicated. It's kind of fascinating and adds to the complication that even if nothing on the site changes, the standards change, so the rules change, so the complication changes, and that's just kind of an interesting thing. And as a side note or an add-on, that day I was actually at the Oregon Brownfields Conference in Salem, and the tannery and the Ken Foster Farm site was a topic, and a room full of environmental professionals hearing about this are like, oh my gosh, that's so complicated. There's just a lot of moving parts. So it's not just a normal brownfield site. It's a very complex brownfield site with a lot of issues. So,
and it seemed to me that the threshold levels that they were talking about that had been actually, 2 years ago, it was determined to be not that big of a deal, and then all of a sudden, the EPA thresholds went down. So that it became a big deal, and now maybe it might go back up to not be quite such a big deal. That's kind of it's about as confusing as it is.
Okay. Anyways, this will be at the library tomorrow in the reference section, so anybody can come and look at it, and we'll just leave it down there. TriMet has announced that they're going to be investing in services again, and later or early this summer, they're going to be releasing their service enhancement plan, and I've been at a meeting with them where they're talking about expanding service to the YMCA. That was something that came out of one of our work group sessions where we had talked about TriMet expanding service. I think some of y'all were there. And also likely includes options for transit service between Tualatin and Sherwood. So expect to see that sometime in July. It'll be their draft enhancement plan, and we can provide comments and advocate for or against some of their proposed enhancements. Two other just real quick feel-good announcements. Friends of the Refuge had over 1,000 people show up at their annual bird festival. That's the third week of May every year. So it's a pretty good turnout over there. And Sherwood is in the running for a $200,000 grant to help build their dog park. And for the state of Oregon, we're pretty much ahead, but if you feel inclined to go out there and vote, it's Bark in the Park is what it's called, and I think you can look on the city website, and there's a link to go out and vote for it. And right now, they're planning on looking at Snyder Park very seriously as the first dog park in Sherwood. It would be the west portion of Snyder Park, which is currently undeveloped or underdeveloped. So,
And Brad, on that, I thought that was 100,000.
is it 100,000?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to match it.
Oh, okay.
It'd take me a lifetime plus, but
Not
I thought it was 200. I thought I had read that today, so must have been something else I had heard today. So with that, tonight I just wanted to jump on a quick soapbox because I know that the TSP, first and foremost, thank you all for your commitment to this. This is a huge document. There's been a lot of reading. I know Commissioner Simpson and I have been on the phone several times at length, and I really, really do appreciate you all putting the time into this. I wanted to point out a couple of things. I mean, just so you move forward through this process and think about it, that the consultant's role in this was to create a network of connected streets which serve all transportation modes in Sherwood. And it was to create an efficient system that is compliant with state and regional policies. And their goal is to ensure that all people have access to safe, healthy, convenient, and affordable transportation options, regardless of age, income, or other socioeconomic factors, and to propose measures by the way of our project lists to the community to help realize a complete system of streets, sidewalks, trails, bike lanes, and transit amenities. Your role then as the Transportation Planning Commission in this whole process is the advisory body to the policymakers, which is the City Council. They'll ultimately make the decision. The proposal tonight is a mix of policy and regulation based on engineering data, long-range forecasting, and assumptions. A lot of it was over my head, and I work in this stuff every day, so I encourage you to ask questions. Your job is, again, to make a recommendation to the City Council based on this proposal tonight. If we're going to change this proposal and reflect that in the recommendation, then we need to make sure that we follow that up with an explanation of why we're changing what we're changing. And I hope that as you're considering the document that you're asking the questions, do I like or dislike the concept? Does the language afford the community an opportunity to study the concept further? Is it right for our community? And are we compliant with state and regional policies? Do I understand what those are? And if we're not compliant, what makes us non-compliant? So jump off my soapbox on that right now, just so everybody was clear what their roles were. With that,
Thank you very much. I'm going to bounce back to the council liaison announcements.
Forgive me, I came from a baseball game in Newburgh and had to watch the catcher tag out at home, which is my son. He would have been mad if I'd missed that. Anyhow, we did pass the budget out of committee, and I believe the vote was 13-1 out of committee. We had some really good news in the budget this year. Before we did some allocations, there were extra reserves of about 11% over the quantity that is specified we have in our guidelines, which is 20%, and that's due to the hard work of staff and the savings that they have made in the last fiscal year. It was equivalent to over $900,000. And so we were able to, we as a budget committee have known this was coming for a few months, and so we made some determinations that approximately $450,000 of that overage would be spent on one-time assets so that it wouldn't be relied on over time, but it could potentially get us a little bit more caught up in some of the maintenance issues that we were behind on, including park replacement, park equipment replacement and things. But in the end, rather than go ahead with a 25% or 24% reserve, we also allocated, I believe, about $300,000 to maintenance so that we can sort of build a reserve for that type of issue. We have known, I think Chair Simpson has been at those meetings, and we have known for quite some time that we built a lot of things about a decade ago, but really didn't have any good plan in place for how to maintain them. And so it has been a goal of the Budget Committee to get to the point where we could, in some way, and I hate to use this word, but catch up. And we're starting to make a real dent in that. Murdoch Park was finished recently, and if you haven't had a chance, it's a really nice opportunity to go down and look at what a great job the Public Works and the Parks Board has done to do that. And that was some of the money we allocated in the last budget cycle to sort of do the catch-up. So there's more of that ahead. I just have to compliment our Public Works Department. Craig Sheldon does an absolutely incredible job. And I feel like we're finally, after 5 years of being on council, starting to get our arms around how to manage. And I really appreciate the hard work that the staff does on a daily basis to conserve resources so that we can catch up. But I also really appreciate the hard work that the Budget Committee does to go about this fiscally minded. I mean, Chair Simpson, you watched that, and it was pretty refreshing to hear, oh, let's not spend it. Let's figure out a way to make sure we don't find ourselves in this position again. So it was good. Did you have any more comments from the budget process?
Just for people that are watching, what are the next steps? Because I know that in years past, it's been very confusing to hear that the budget has been approved,
but not adopted.
And for people listening, can you explain what the next step is and what the citizen involvement opportunity is?
Okay, so there was citizen comment opportunities at the Budget Committee level. The Budget Committee is made up of 7 citizen volunteers and the 7 City Council members to comprise 14 members of the Budget Committee. Julie Blums, our finance director, did something a little different this year. We wanted to encourage more citizen involvement in the process, so she held one of the budget meetings on a Saturday morning. It didn't work out terribly well for some of us on the committee. I was unable to attend as I had to be in 4 places at once. But she was really hoping that would encourage some citizen involvement. It didn't. I don't believe that we had anybody, but Commissioner Kopfer actually had come that morning. So I don't know that that'll be a tradition because I know it was a pretty big challenge this time of year. But so what happens is it gets adopted or it gets approved by the Budget Committee, and then it's pushed on to the City Council. And I believe it's at our June 17th City Council meeting. It's on the agenda. We will go through a review of the budget, clearly not as in-depth as the Budget Committee, but there is public comment allowed at that meeting. People can, as always, citizen comment can be allowed at the meeting. But then once the City Council votes on it, the budget is then officially adopted. And it's not just approved, it's adopted, and it does become the plan for the next fiscal year, which begins July 1st.
So the citizens have an opportunity to testify at the budget hearing in front of the City Council on the 17th.
Correct. Yes, that has been the past practice. And although the election results aren't certified, all 5 of the charter amendments did pass, and by a great margin, 70 to 20% at least on every one. And I think that's what's going on with City Council right now. I don't think we have anything else. So we start next week and get going again.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
I'm really sorry I was late. If you have a child in baseball, it is life consuming. I mean, nothing compares to 4 games a week.
I
So,
can imagine that.
yeah, it's crazy.
So,
One
yes.
other thing, I'll just hand it out, or I'll leave it here, and if y'all want to take it later, there was an article in the DJC today about the signal removal in the Lula court case. I don't know if y'all are interested. If you guys
It's in
get the
what?
DJC, the Daily Journal of Commerce. It's a business journal that goes. I've always seen it at architecture and engineering firms, and
Okay.
talks a lot about development issues in the metro area and things from a private sector standpoint. So.
Okay, thank you. The next are community comments. These are for issues in front of the community that are not already on our agenda. And for this item and for the public hearing that we're going to be having, we ask that you fill one of the blue cards out on the back table and turn it in to the recording secretary so that we may call you up to the table to speak to us. So at this time, I would call for community comments.
TSP and not community comments.
Okay, so seeing no one raise their hand, if you want to speak on something, please come to the microphone and you'll just say your name and we'll have you fill out a blue card before you leave
I
tonight.
filled out one there.
Is it for community comment or for the TSP?
Well, I didn't know what I was doing, but this is a community comment. So.
As long as it's not testimony on the transportation plan,
No, it
we're here
doesn't
to
have
hear-
anything to do with the plan per se, but it has transportation and Sherwood involved. The community, right? And also, I've got some candy for each one of you if you'll listen. I'll be brief. My name's Keith Weir, and I drive to Sherwood almost every day and work out for, real hard for 30 minutes, and then I drive home, and pretend that I'm a good guy. Anyway, when I drive in, many days, I go on Railroad Street and maybe turn up Main Street or one of the streets, and giant buses come along. And they take up both lanes. And sometimes I've had to back up. Sometimes the bus driver has to back up. I'm not alone. I've seen it happen to many other customers in Sherwood. I talked to the police about it and about enforcement or that, and they said, well, TriMet handles everything. And I talked to somebody at City Hall, and they said, TriMet handles everything. And it seems to me that the city of Sherwood could do real well by not letting TriMet handle everything. When I came in here at 6:45, bus number 212 was rolling by, and boy, they had so many people in it. They had the bus driver in it. Amazing. Why do we need that big bus out there? I don't know. Just briefly, Tualatin-Sherwood Highway, enlarged to 4 lanes. We got to do that sometime. They've got bike lanes, turn lanes, sidewalks. And if you've ever driven up and down there, you see lots of people on those sidewalks. Sometimes there's 1 or 2, between Tualatin and Sherwood. And maybe sometimes 1 or 2 bicyclists. Those sidewalks cost a lot of money, and those bike lanes cost a lot of money. Then you got a turn lane there that's used a few times, but they could just take that and make 4 lanes out of it just with the space they've got. And it wouldn't cost a lot of money. It would cost some money, but it wouldn't cost like what all these 217 remodelings and everything else costs. The other thing going along with this, just one other thought, maybe Sherwood should look to the future in their internal transportation and perhaps go Bridgeport way. You don't need any cars in Old Town Sherwood. Keep them all out of Old Town. Make a Bridgeport out of Sherwood, only a better Bridgeport than Bridgeport is. And Sherwood has the character and the mojo to do that. And it's there. You can just feel it when you walk around, if you've walked around rather than driving around in a bus or a car. And the cars and the buses spoil downtown Sherwood, too. It becomes kind of, oh, what is this? Oh, this is a lot of old cars here. The only time we want that is during cruising Sherwood, not other times. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have
very-
any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. And just so you know, Washington County takes care of the 12th and Sherwood Road, and they do have it on their plan to widen that. So
It would be good. It's essential.
hopefully in all of our lifetimes.
And I didn't point out all the dangers involved in the bus thing and the car thing that we all know is dangerous the way it is. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
This isn't a bribe.
Chair Simpson, can I clarify something on the buses? Because this issue, I don't know if it was Mr. Weir or somebody else, brought that up last week, and there was some discussion about TriMet. And it's certainly not all TriMet just dictating where they go. There is back and forth and communication and coordination with the city and TriMet. And that's something, I think that we probably need to have additional conversations about with TriMet and say, is this working for you, or are there alternate, routes that might make your turning movements a little bit easier? So I think we need to have that conversation with TriMet, but it's not just them deciding exactly where they go. There's a lot of back and forth with the city as well. So,
And is that your department or the city manager or the council?
It's multiple. It's engineering certainly has input, public works for streets, TVF&R. So there's a lot of departments that will be coordinated with.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing, Gene, along with that, City Council has directed city staff to look at what the cost of the removal of those monuments would be, replacing them with something less, site restraining and everything else. And we're doing that, but it's a little bit of a back burner project in that I'm trying to get through all that stuff with everything else that's going on. It's on our task list.
It's a monumental task, I can imagine.
Yes.
Oh, man. I know. That was terrible, wasn't it? All right. Before I get any more trouble, I don't see anybody else asking for community comments at this time. So now we have new business, which is a public hearing, and this is a legislative land use hearing, so I'm going to read this. Hopefully. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to testify and provide information to the Planning Commission concerning PA 1401 Transportation System Plan Update. The Commission will conduct tonight's hearing in the following order. Staff will present the staff report, followed by questions, if any, by the Planning Commission. We will then open the hearing for public testimony, and each person's time will be limited as followed. It says applicant, but I'm going to assume that's staff and consultants. 30 minutes. Persons in favor of the application, 4 minutes. Persons opposed to the application, 4 minutes. And then rebuttal from the applicant will be the remaining of 30 minutes. We will then close the public hearing. Final comments by staff. Questions of staff, if any, by the Commission. Discussion and deliberation by the Commission. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the blue testimony forms and submit it to the recording secretary. The Planning Commission chair will recognize people who wish to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone and make sure the red button is up. For this hearing, the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to the council, and the council is the final hearing authority unless it's appealed to LUBA, correct? That's it. This is a legislative matter, so there's no bias or conflict. What do we have, Chris? There's no ex parte contact.
No ex parte, no bias, but if you have conflict of interest, that should be declared.
So at this time, does anybody want to declare conflict of interest with the transportation system plan? Hearing none, we will call for the staff report.
Good evening, Chair Simpson and Commissioners. Brad Kilby, I'm the planning manager here at the City of Sherwood. Just a quick background on the Sherwood Transportation System Plan was last updated in 2005, barring some of the minor amendments we've done for individual projects like Cedar Brook Way and the extension of Baylor and Langer Farms Parkway North. This is a staff-initiated proposal, and the proposal is to amend the city's comprehensive plan, Chapter 6, the goals and policies within that chapter. I'm not going to belabor you with all of the details because we've talked about it in work sessions on two separate occasions, and it's been available for quite a while. The city's development code, which specifically Chapter 16.10 definitions, 16.80 plan amendments, 16.90 site plan review, off-street parking and loading in 1694, and transportation facilities in 16106. The brunt of what you'll see tonight, I think, are going to be found in the site plan review, off-street parking and loading, and transportation facilities. It amends the 2005 Transportation System Plan. In essence, if this is adopted, it would supersede that 2005 Transportation System Plan. Until this is adopted, that is still the active transportation plan. And then it also does a map amendment to remove a trip cap that was imposed in 2008 to the trailer park over the Pfeiffer property next to Providence off of Highway 99. At that time, that Ordinance 2008-03 was put in place. They did not do a traffic analysis to show that it was consistent with the transportation planning rules, so the council decided at that time that they would put the additional cap on that piece of property. And as a result of this process, there has been traffic modeling that models that traffic as retail commercial, so that it's no longer needed to demonstrate because we've identified measures to mitigate impacts from having that developed out at commercial. Public involvement for this was fairly extensive for a 6-month project. It's 2 planning commission work sessions. We had a dedicated website, and Bob updated that website at least monthly, if not more. I've followed the updates myself. There were 2 public open houses in addition to our roundtable discussion here. A Citizens Advisory Committee met on 3 separate occasions, and a Technical Advisory Committee met on 3 other separate occasions. So the Citizens Advisory Committee was made up of citizens from the community that Bob had asked to participate, and there's quite a variety. I think Gene was, our Commissioner Simpson was on that committee, and we've had several citizens that regularly attend these meetings on that committee as well. The Technical Advisory Committee was made up of engineers and planners and policy folks from ODOT and Washington County and Tualatin and Beaverton and Tigard on the Technical Advisory Committee. The draft TSP has been available to the public for comment since late March. Obviously, you know that there's been iterations as a result of your work sessions. And so hopefully that folks have been participating along the way. It's been discussed in several Archer articles and comprehensively in some Gazette articles as well. The proposed amendments meet the necessary approval criteria to justify your recommendation for approval. That being said, it is a policy document, and staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval of the proposed amendments to the Sherwood City Council based on the work and input that you have put into this process up to date. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to the consultants and Bob to fill in at your leisure.
Okay, our consultants are DKS and Angelo Planning Group, Chris Majeski and Darcia, and Garth. So with that, you've seen them before, they're back.
Take our seat.
Great. And Brad, can you pull up the other presentation file? All right, so we're going to start with a recap for you from our last work session, but for the benefit of those who weren't able to attend. Brad, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll just signal you. You need a little remote here. Excuse me. So we're going to do a process overview of how we put this plan together, what kind of the core content of it was, what the purpose of the plan was, talk about the project list with just a high-level overview of the types of projects that are in there. We won't be going through each one in detail. Talk about areas for further refinements, things that need to happen beyond this planning process, and then highlights of some proposed implementation code pieces. So where we're at in the process, we're at the final step of adoption. This started, about a year ago, and at the outset we compiled a bunch of planning work that's been done in the city and in the region over the last 5+ years. We inventoried what the city has for transportation infrastructure now, how it's working, how people use it, and identified needs that are out there today. We then forecasted out 20 years into the future using Metro's regional forecast tool and identified what the needs would be in the year 2035. With those needs identified, we considered what money we had to work with, the finance side of it, and went through a process of developing alternatives to meet those needs, multimodal transportation projects. And with that, we came out with a preferred list of projects and implementing ordinances that went along with it. So now we're here for adoption. Okay. The document itself, a little overview of what's in it and why it's useful. First of all, it sets the vision for the community on how it wants the transportation system to help you manage growth. There's strategies in there to guide you in that decision making. There's a list of projects, future improvements that would improve safety, operation, mobility, connectivity, all those types of needs around the community. One of the most important parts of it are the standards that are in the document. Standards for cross sections. What should the components of a street be in terms of how wide the travel lanes are? Should there be a sidewalk? How wide is the sidewalk? Things of that nature. Standards on access spacing. How far apart should driveways be? How far apart should roadways be? Traffic calming standards. How do you protect the livability of residential neighborhoods primarily as traffic volumes increase? And standards about connectivity and where you connect local streets. And finally, mobility. How do we manage congestion and how much is the city willing to tolerate? Okay. So compared to your 2005 plan, what's really changed? Why are we doing this update? One is the 2005 plan looked out to the year 2020. So we're getting awfully close to that, and we need to have a 20-year plan in place. So we're updating to go to 2035. We have an updated project list that compiles all the work that's been done over the last 5+ years, as I said, from the regional perspective, major facilities being planned like 12th and Sherwood Road widening that was mentioned earlier, as well as all the concept plan areas and all the work that's been done around Sherwood. The project list itself is a little different than last time, and I'll go into a little more detail on that. But in particular, it's focused on lower cost strategies to help manage congestion, as opposed to major capital improvements to widen roadways and try to build yourself out of congestion. Mobility targets are highlighted much more in the document now, and of course the removal of the cap ordinance. So to build the project list to do all those things, we started with establishing our transportation goals, and we relied on the goals that you already had as policy elements and worked with our advisory groups to help develop evaluation criteria that aligned with those. And again, we used a funding constraint, the revenue constraints, and compared our evaluation criteria to figure out which alternatives made the most sense. And you'll see in the following slides, we have two different sets of projects to share with you and have in the plan. One we're calling conservatively fundable, and that's looking at a backcast over the last 5 years. How much revenue has the city been receiving that can be expended on transportation, and it projects that out for the next 20 years. The second fundable plan is the projected fundable, and that takes into account all the potential growth areas around the city and the revenue that could come in with that. Go ahead, Brad. On these project lists, what's a little different in being focused on lower cost items is also the focus on safety and multimodal projects. Looking at the breakdown in these fundable plans, about a third that's pedestrian projects, a third motor vehicle, and then another third in bicycle and transit. The 2005 plan had a much more significant component that was motor vehicle focused. So this is much more of a multimodal plan than what we've had in the past. Motor vehicle projects, again, I won't go through the details of all these, but the document lists all the projects by mode, and it color codes them, and in the updated graphics you have in your packet has a different symbol for what is a nearer term, medium term, or longer term priority. Okay, and I think we can skip through these slides here, Brad. The areas for future refinement, you will see some updated language in the draft TSP about the Brookman Road area, coordinating with Washington County and designating that as an arterial roadway, but acknowledging there's some compatibility issues with the concept plan for the Brookman Addition area and the need to do further work and potentially revisit that concept plan. City and ODOT staff have been coordinating on Highway 99W cross sections, and I believe we're nearly complete with having some agreement on those. Brad mentioned earlier local transit service enhancements. TriMet has been continuing to work on those. Sounds like this summer we'll be hearing a proposal, so that would be something to incorporate into your planning down the road. Further need for parking management plan. That's something that was identified in the town center planning process, I believe, that would be a future work item. And there's one other statement that was added in there, or was it a goal or a strategy? I'm not sure which, but support from the community around relieving congestion from through traffic. Support for regional efforts to work with Washington County or other jurisdictions, and anything that gets through traffic either on 12th and Sherwood Road or Highway 99 that's just passing through Sherwood, give them an option to go around the city is something that would be supported. Okay. So those are the highlights of the plan itself.
Great. Good evening. Darcy Rudzinski with the Angelo Planning Group, and I was one of the planners that worked on your policy language and your code. And as you can see from the bullets there, it's been a process through the update of the TSP. We've gotten feedback from your advisory groups as well as yourselves through a couple of different work sessions. And so the language has evolved a bit, but also something that Brad stated was that one of our objectives was to get the proposed language to get the city in closer compliance with the Regional Transportation Functional Plan, which in turn implements the Regional Transportation Plan, as well as the State Transportation Planning Rule. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we've just highlighted some of the more substantial areas of change that's being proposed in your code. And we've talked at length about the traffic impact analysis. One thing I can note is that in the purpose and context statement, the code really articulates what is existing city practice in that the city uses the impact analysis to assess what the impacts of proposed development might be on the transportation system, and if necessary, gives you the city the power to ask for mitigation and make sure that your transportation system is in line with the growth that you're seeing. Let's see. We also, again, clarified bicycle parking requirements, the removal of the CAP program. That's reflected in your code. For the comprehensive plan policies, again, generally, the changes both in the code and the comp plan are intended to reflect what's happening in your transportation system plan so that you have underlying policy that supports basically what you require of developments and what you require of city improvements when you go and build a new facility for your community. There are also some housekeeping items. If strategies or implementation measures have already happened, then we've simply suggested that you delete those. They're kind of pictures in time. You've accomplished that. We suggested that you could go ahead and eliminate. And again, just internal consistency within the comprehensive plan. So policy issues reflected. Planning coordination with your regional partners, with Metro, County, ODOT, performance targets and measures. Again, we'll probably talk about that a little bit more, but there's a policy that articulates Sherwood's intention to try to meet regional measures, or adopt measures that will reflect Metro targets. As Chris stated, the through traffic has come up as an issue, and so there's policy language that encourages that through traffic. Regional trips don't happen on your local street systems. And then I think maybe I'll stop there. We'll go with questions.
So I would ask the commission to kind of consider a thought process on how we entertain questions to the consultants and receive testimony from the citizens. I'd almost like to propose that we get the questions from the audience on the table in front of us, and then we can gather all those questions and ask the consultants to come back for us. I know I read a testimony that says legislative, we're going to do it this way, but I believe this document is a bit different than a standard legislative hearing that we're forwarding forward. And if we could get questions from the audience ahead of time, then we can compile those with our questions and do kind of like we did in the work session, a front to back view of all the documents that are in front of us. Does anybody have any concerns about doing it that way?
Just one. What if there was an additional need for one of the community to speak again? How would we?
Well, this is the first public hearing. At the end of this process, we can either elect to continue this hearing and keep it open either for written record or for further testimony. But this is only the first evidentiary hearing. They will have a second opportunity. If they want to speak a second time, the council will have a full opportunity to take testimony at that time. So that. All right, so I think we will take. Yeah, but Brad, before we all break. So
was there anything on those slides that you guys want me to keep this going for, or? Okay, I'm just.
Oh, you mean keep it?
Yeah.
For like the map or something?
Yeah. Would a map help if I just put one of those maps back up there? Just in case. We better do that.
Yeah, maybe just putting that map up that way. If someone wants to point at a particular road, we can all get focused in on the area they're discussing. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so if you guys are okay with that, we'll go ahead and take public testimony. Any of my blue cards?
One more. There's a written testimony that was submitted by Wade Anderson. Do you want me to read it? I'd be happy to read it, or if you want, we'll take a quick recess to read it.
Why don't we take the public comment, and then we can take, at that time, it'll probably be appropriate for a 10-minute break anyway, and we can read it at the break. Okay. All right, I have two cards. The first one is Ty Wyman.
Thank you very much, Chair Simpson. My name is Ty Wyman. I'm here as attorney for Merlone Geyer Partners, which owns the Albertsons-based shopping center on 12 and Sherwood Road. I first note that the clock, which is very helpful to those of us in this chair, is not on. Are we?
That's a
Can I speak for as long as I would like?
Since I can't see it, then you're.
No, it's over there.
And I don't intend to take it all, but okay, that gives me some guidance and absolute seriousness. Very much appreciate, again, your time and attention to us, and very much appreciate Brad distributing the article. I actually hadn't seen it. I think the article does a good job talking about the case. We are well aware that what you're considering tonight is just far beyond our little traffic signal, but our little traffic signal is awfully important to us. Cutting to the chase of my testimony, at this point, Merlone Geyer is not going to ask for any revisions to what staff has put in front of you or additions to it. We thought about something that would sort of try to lock the signal in more than it is, but we already think the signal is already in the plan, and so we are asserting now to the courts that is sufficient. Mostly, I just wanted to again surface the issue, let you know we are still here, and will be here into the future. Merlone Geyer is a God forbid, California-based company, but nonetheless, it is invested in this community for the long term. We are invested in this process, and they intend to hold that property, signal or no, into the foreseeable future, and it's going to be in the city, so we'll be doing business together. The only other thing I think of substance that I wanted to add is my appreciation, not only to you, but also to your staff. They have worked with us. Brad and Bob sat down with my client and me. I think it was actually a Friday afternoon in late April, when I'm sure that they had better things to do, and just had a very good, candid conversation about our issue. Unless you really want me to, I'm not going to go into depth about our issue, because I think it's pretty well known at this point. But and we don't pretend for a minute that it's an easy one. If it were easy, we wouldn't be where we are today with it. So that's it for me tonight. Unless again you have any questions or comments.
Any questions?
And I'd like to reserve that minute 18 for the next time I show up.
All right.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Tony Bevel.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Bevel. I live on Southwest Lindley. I've lived there 16, 17 years. I have to confess, and I've been told I'm a pretty narrow-minded and selfish person. So I want what I want, and this is what I want from you for your consideration. I'd like to talk about a unique street. It's unique not only because I live on it, but it's unique that it's a cut-through street from Roy Rogers to Edie Road, and that's Southwest Lindley and Southwest Houston. During certain times of the day, and I hope I don't sound like a broken record, I've used the term, PIR, Portland International Raceway. I used to go there quite often to see the Indy carts, and I can identify with the chicanes there. I mean, people going on those little turns, I guess it's human nature to pick up speed when you make a turn and to make up that little bit of lost ground. Well, I'd like to see that traffic calming devices are placed there. Again, I've picked up a dead cat. I've picked up a dead skunk off of the street on my little curve. I live on a curve. The mailbox is diagonal off of the curve on the other side of the street. When you walk, the mail person comes at 5:30, and God forbid you have to, get something important out of the mailbox that just can't wait. So you go across at 5:30. People make it plain that, hey, this is a road, this is a street. You have no business walking across the street to go to the mailbox. And that's that's the way I feel. And, you know, you may think I'm a cranky old man, but I'm not the only one. People, you know, don't respect that street. They're going from Roy Rogers to Edie to get to wherever they're going. And, you know, their moms, you have to pick up kids. Their, fathers going home to meet the family. So I can identify with that. So I suggest to you that you put out calming devices there to, you know, correct behavior, bad behavior, and we all have it. So that's my request. Visit that subject again, and I've been told before the reason why you don't consider it is because of the impact that it has on, emergency vehicles. Well, you know, that doesn't cut it. That doesn't hold water because there are other cities and that do have calming devices, even speed bumps, God forbid. And there are ways to, you know, mitigate any damage that would be done to emergency vehicles. That's my comment on that. And I have one question for the consultant group. I mean, if you're looking 20 years down the road, how is the north side where I live, how is a pedestrian going to get across to the south side, get to Sherwood walking? I tell you, I see people do it all the time. I've done it. But 20 years from now, given traffic, I can't see it. I used to live in by the Ross Island Bridge, off of Powell Boulevard, and there they had a little bridge, a walkway. I used to ride my bike over it, no problem. And pedestrian use that to get to the other side of the road. That's just a comment. But again, the calming devices on Southwest Lindley, I hope you consider that. Because I've been here, this will make my 4th time, and obviously I haven't impressed anyone because nothing's happened yet. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry. All right, I have one more blue card, Eugene Stewart. Again, if you want to testify tonight, we ask you to fill out a blue card and turn it in to the recording secretary.
Eugene Stewart, Sherwood, Oregon, property owner. I did serve on the committee, and I don't think we had enough time to discuss a lot of things. And it appears to me at times that we're rushing to satisfy Metro instead of looking at the citizens, see what they need and what we should be doing. I did notice the last draft that came out last week. I was out of town. I would like to suggest you continue this hearing and leave it open for public comment. A bypass around Sherwood. One interesting thing at one of the meetings, there was a gentleman that came up, and I don't know if it was recorded or not, but he's related to transportation, trucks, and his comment is that when the Dundee-Newburgh bypass gets built and finished, that we're going to see a lot more traffic coming up this way. Because right now they don't like to go through Newburgh. They cut over to Salem and come up. But once the bypass around Dundee and Newburgh is in, it's going to create a better situation for them to drive up here instead of going over to Salem. I also have a client who lives on the other side of the Tualatin River on Roy Rogers Road, and their property is being looked at for development, but in their talk with county planners, they've been told that by 2018, I believe, Roy Rogers will be 5 lanes from Shoals Ferry to 99W. So now, right now, what they're proposing is just 4 lane to the light behind Safeway. What happens when you put 4 lanes the rest of the way? What does it do to those neighborhoods there? That's why I think it is important that the Sherwood look at a bypass around our core area so that traffic who does not want to stop in Sherwood, they can get through without causing jams. This evening when I came home, about 5:30, we were backed up all the way to the junkyard. That's unacceptable, and it's getting worse. You can do that up to 3 times a week now. That you'll see that it's more continuously backing up. When you look at traffic coming, especially in the evening, even through Old Town, I would estimate that 90% of that traffic is not stopping in Old Town. It's just going through because they can't find any other way around that's easier or quicker, just like the gentleman on his road. So I think we need to look at this more seriously. We need to find out where traffic is coming from, where it's going to, how can we handle it. I know Metro is pushing against single occupant vehicles. The measurement of some of your traffic counts was done in main heavy time in the evening. Well, stop and think. There's not very many trucks there. Why? Because most of them are probably done by 5 o'clock at night. And if they are on the other side of Sherwood, either way, they've already gone through Sherwood, so you don't get a chance to count them. The count was taken on a Thursday. I saw one plan, it was done in 2010. Well, what's happened in 4 years? Has it gone up, gone down? We went through a recession. Did that affect truck traffic? Then also look at the counts of bicycles and pedestrians at these major intersections. There's more pedestrians walking across. I think in one was 4 and they had 1 bicycle. So why are we going forward with some of these bicycle plans that there's not the demand there for it? On your map, it shows where bicyclists may go, but they don't show where it's coming from. Will we? On the other hand, what do we do about skateboarders? Where are they going to go? And there's lots of things in this thing I'd like to talk about, but there's just 4 minutes is inadequate to say some of the things that are in here. So I wish that you would continue it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else wishing to testify this evening? All right, then we are going to take a 10-minute recess to get the written testimony that was submitted, give everybody a chance to read that, and take a break. All right, we'll call back to order, and everybody's had an opportunity to read the written testimony. Are these numbered as exhibits at this point?
That's the only one we received. We probably should label it as an exhibit,
So this
which
will
I
be
think it would be exhibit G.
G? Why G? Why is it G?
Because I think we have exhibits E through F already.
Oh. Okay, so this will be the written testimony from Wade Anderson will be Exhibit G, based on staff report.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll call the staff consultants back to the table so that we can start addressing questions, comments that came up. I guess from my point of view, I'd like to address the questions that were raised by the citizens just now about what came out of, for me, questions regarding traffic calming and what's the process for getting that implemented. I know that the TSP has it documented in here, but I think within the staff purview, there's a process in place now that Bob,
Yes.
Bob, how does traffic calming get implemented in
Usually
the
we
city?
we get the comments as a complaint, either in through our engineering department or through the police department. The determination of what we're going to be doing with those complaints starts with the PD doing an investigation of the complaint itself and what the traffic conditions are really like. So they'll do analysis and see what the traffic loading is like through there. They may run a traffic count scenario, which also takes into account it collects data such as speed, the number of cars going through. Usually, the two complaints we have are there's too many cars and they're going through too fast. The police department basically collects data that says, what's the speed of the average thing? Are they hitting the 85th percentile or are they exceeding it? That's number one. If it's a speed issue, they'll do enforcement because that is a safety issue. The traffic volume issue is more of a quality of life issue. And what we have to do there is say, okay, what can we do to sort of hit the low-hanging fruit as far as trying to make a change to the system that will sort of make drivers want to go someplace else than spend all their time going through that subdivision. And with that particular subdivision, we added a whole bunch of stop signs at every intersection along the way. Now, does that change the overall level of how many people go through there? Right now, we haven't seen a drop, but we haven't checked back with it at this time frame. But usually what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll revisit and say, okay, here's the first step that we've implemented. Did it work? Did it not work? If it didn't work, what's the next implementation process that we can go through? What's the next step? We just haven't gotten there yet. Like I said, the whole palette of low-hanging fruit is what least option works the best, and then keep going up and ratcheting it up.
Okay, so the citizen have an opportunity, just not part of the TSP process, but through engineering and through the police and potentially even through council to raise this up to a level of awareness so someone goes back and revisits it.
There's an internal process that deals with this issue.
Okay.
Yes.
And can I also add, we at the staff level know that we need to have a more formal and a more robust traffic calming program, neighborhood traffic calming program, and that's something that we're working on. It's unfortunately not something we have spent a lot of manpower making more robust and making more comprehensive, but it's something that is definitely on maybe not the rear burner, but maybe the side burner, now that we're done with the TSP, should be getting up to the front burner. And then that, a better traffic calming program coupled with a capital improvement program that might allocate some investments, or as we're making certain traffic improvements on major roadways, considering the impacts on local roadways and having a system that we can look to. That's kind of all part of how we plan to address those concerns as they arise.
Okay, so moving to the TSP, we've actually identified a project called D29 as a collector from Roy Rogers to Sherwood Boulevard. That is a long-term goal project, that little blue dotted line, correct?
Correct, and that's a project driven out of looking at the collector grid spacing and Metro's requirements for having a complete grid. That was one of the gaps we identified. And
so as long-term project, there is identified that potential relief on Lindley and Houston if this road could be built.
Correct.
Okay. And then pedestrian crossing on Highway 99. I think the next slide's the pedestrian part. Have we identified pedestrian crossings additional?
What we've identified are at the signalized locations. Edie, for example, providing crosswalks on both sides when you're crossing the highway instead of just one. And then, of course, there is the trail project to long-term have a grade-separated crossing.
Okay, so I think we're... the other comment that was in the written document regarding pedestrian was a crossing which I don't see on our transportation plan, which when I go walking about every night is, hey, where'd it go? The Langer Farms sidewalk. There's no crossing on the Langer Farms
Yeah.
between It keeps moving, but there is no legal crosswalk across Langer Farms Parkway between Century and Oregon Street. So, is that possible to be identified as an?
If there's an intersection there would be a
Won't be.
legal crossing, whether it's striped or not. But
Whether it's striped or not, but maybe for safety purposes, it would be nice to be striped because there is an intersection there.
And it may require more than striping to have a safe crossing at that location, so we would have to evaluate that. So we might call it out as a potential enhanced crossing if you wanted to add that as a TSP project.
Well, for block length, that's a really long block. So I think that's a really valid point if we could consider putting that into the pedestrian plan. Or I'm getting nods from the other commissioners that this is making sense. So I don't.
It wouldn't be a bad idea.
Okay, so if it's not a bad idea, maybe we can. How do we,
We would modify the project list in the map to reflect an additional enhanced crossing at that location.
Okay,
Let's do that.
Let's do that then. And then the other citizen comments, I was trying to track them all. I appreciate Ty Wyman's comment about the light issue. You're right. If it were easy, we would have solved it already, wouldn't we have? I'm wondering, the last question was about keeping it open. I know on a regular hearing, we're obligated to keep the record open if a continuance has been requested. Is that also true in the legislative? Because there's two full hearing processes. If we choose to close the public hearing tonight and go for deliberation, the public is still allowed to testify at the second one, so it's not a legal requirement.
It's not a legal requirement because it's not in the statute. I can't remember what the policy reasons were why the legislature thought to insert that requirement in a quasi-judicial context, but not the legislative. But there it is. You are required to in a quasi-judicial, but not in this context.
Okay, so I just want to know legally what we were supposed to consider. So, all right, so back to the staff and how we're going to address Planning Commission comments and concerns regarding this, all the documents that we have in front of us. Where do you want to start or end with this?
What do you think is?
Well, I have some easy, like if we want to go for the low-hanging fruit, volume 2. I just had a couple of comments and concerns that we could probably hit pretty fast. And I'm not sure, in Section A, the Plan and Policy Summary Report, it mentions on page 4 and 5 the 12th and Sherwood Industrial Area on the 12th and Sherwood Road, and I was expressing a concern that the Tonquin Employment Area is not
Called
out, and how was it incorporated into the plan?
Yeah, so that document there is our kind of context setting exercise where we go through and review what all the currently adopted plans have in it, and so it's referring to language from Metro's plan in that section, and that's, I believe, how they have it identified. I can tell you that the land use and the transportation system from that concept planning effort for the Tonquin employment lands were incorporated into the analysis that we did. And so all the substantive content out of that effort was brought forward. So the reference there, we could add a footnote to clarify it's referenced as this in city documents, but it wouldn't change how we conducted our analysis.
Okay. So I guess my concern is just calling it out as part of the plan document to say either primary land uses or secondary land uses incorporated the Tonquin employment area, because I think that's going to be a large driver for transportation.
Would that be part of the footnote there, 10? Just adding a sentence to indicate, like you said, inclusion.
Yeah, I think we would probably
Consider
do
it
it
in the
via footnote to add that clarification.
Okay, perfect. And then on footnote 11, on page 5, it says the town center is under consideration. I just think updating to say that it has been adopted would be appropriate.
Okay.
And then I had 2 more comments in section A, which is 9. The regional transportation plan regarding non-single occupancy vehicles. I just want to know how that applies to Sherwood when we are not Gresham, we're not Southeast Portland, we are a module outside and again not as well covered by transit. So how do these targets apply to Sherwood?
Good question, and I'll let Darcy chime in if I don't get this quite right. But Metro establishes these targets for the region, and their targets do vary by area. Outer neighborhoods are different than inner neighborhoods with targets. Town centers and regional centers are different than employment areas, and so they have varied somewhat. But I would say the designations in their 2040 concept plan for Sherwood are equivalent to what you'll see in other suburban areas around the region. So Sherwood's not unique in what the targets are. The way that we use the targets and we have to incorporate them into the TSP is to check based on Metro's modeling data if their model says that you're in compliance with those targets, and if you're not, are you moving towards compliance with your 20-year plan? The analysis we provided in the plan shows that in all areas of town except the very northeastern portion out off of Sipol Road area was all in compliance with what their targets were. So we didn't have any specific strategies to modify things to address anything. Darcy, anything to?
That's great.
So these are Metro's targets, and by the documents provided, we're already in compliance and meeting what their goals are or moving towards those goals with the strategies that we have in place.
Correct. And one of the things we talked about early in this process, the Regional Transportation Functional Plan, RTFP, had a certain series of developing alternatives we had to go through, starting with operational enhancements, moving to pedestrian bicycle, and kind of building our way up to major capacity projects. That process itself is one of the ways that they are trying to, from a policy perspective, dictate communities move towards those targets. And so by doing the plan the way you've done it, plus the data they're already showing, from what we know from Metro's review of the plan, you're in compliance.
Okay. I just have concerns, and it'll probably be a common theme throughout my concerns, questions, and comments is trying to apply Metro standards to a unique community. Even though we're not unique according to Metro, we are. We are in a little node out by ourselves, and I think that we need to try and preserve our small town community and feel when we go through this document. And I've spoken with other people in the community that have that same concern that we don't have, we don't have the same requirements that Metro might have in the Southeast Portland area. So I guess that's what I just keep expressing as a concern, that we are a small community on the fringe of Metro.
Is there anything we can do about that?
And is there, when we look at this, how do we?
Because if Metro's treating us the same as other communities, we really aren't able to bring our uniqueness into it, is what your concern is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And if you weren't meeting the targets and it was forcing you into actions that you didn't want, it'd probably be a more substantial issue, I would imagine. Again, we didn't use the findings of that analysis to modify the project lists or the policies we have in here, I don't believe. So I'm not sure that it's right now something that is worth tackling, but long term, if it becomes an issue, it might be something you want to consider talking with them about and asking if there can be specific targets for unique areas.
And that goes towards the draft goals and strategies and policies that you put forth. If we decide that what policies and strategies that are in the next part that we're going to be looking at tonight, we start hacking out a few of these because we don't believe they meet our community vision, are we then in trouble of, violating a metro thing that they're going to cut off our funding or something?
Probably let us know that.
Right. The changes that you're seeing really do reflect a lot of the multimodal goals, the non-SOV targets. I mean, you are seeing these because they weren't strongly emphasized in your policy language, for example, or the idea was there, but it would certainly be a lot easier for someone from the region to look at it and say, "Ah, yes, I recognize that term. Sherwood is being part of this regional planning process by adopting this policy." So, to the extent that it can be, the recommended language can be modified to better reflect your community, I think that this is the perfect opportunity for doing that. That said, these targets, this regional transportation functional plan, the regional transportation plan, while it is, high level and all encompassing of the region, Sherwood does have representation at Metro, and you are represented on the technical advisory committees and the policy advisory committees, and of course you have a Metro counselor. So you were getting to kind of the layers of government that you're part of. And again, your plan should reflect your community's goals, but also recognize that you're part of a region and that there are regional, aspirations that would be really good to see reflected in your plans.
And that calls out my next concern and the last one that I have regarding this Section A, which is on page 12, which defines in the RTP, Metro's RTP in the near term, which is 1 to 4 years, alternatives analysis for high-capacity transit. And so I guess I want to know what our comfort level is and how that integrates in our community and how they define it.
Commissioner Simpson.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Could you be more specific? Like, I know you said page 12, in which document? And so
I'm still all in volume 2, section A.
Perfect. That's it. Okay.
So,
Page 12.
yeah, section A of volume 2, page 12 says in the near term, Metro's RTP identified that Sherwood needed to complete an alternatives analysis for high capacity transit corridor.
And I believe that's referring to the Southwest Corridor planning process that's underway right now that Metro is leading. Not a new effort that Sherwood would undertake.
Yeah, I agree. That would be my assumption, and perhaps it should be clarified that these aren't things that Sherwood specifically needs to do by ourselves, but as the regional look, but also specify that look is part of the Southwest Corridor high-capacity planning project, which, as we know, no longer has high-capacity transit going to Sherwood, but we're part of the Southwest Corridor planning effort with local transit service connecting into the high-capacity transit.
That is in Tualatin.
Tigard to Tualatin, Portland Tigard to Tualatin.
Okay. So the way the document's reading, then, this is what Metro is requesting of us, and by our inclusion in the Southwest Corridor study area, even though we're not part of the high-capacity transit solution, we are connected through a local, potentially through the transit enhanced service that you're talking about that may be connecting us to Tualatin directly.
Correct, and participating in the planning process, which is looking at overall corridor strategies besides just the design of the high-capacity transit itself.
Okay. I didn't, when I was reading, I felt like we were getting ourselves committed to doing something that maybe the community as a whole wouldn't be comfortable with.
So it's general enough language. It's not particularly specific here.
So we could refer to the Southwest Corridor process for sure.
Okay.
Right, and just to point out, too, that the plan and policy summary was really done at the beginning of the process to illustrate, again, all the myriad planning documents that not necessarily governed but informed your transportation planning process. So it doesn't obligate, that particular document doesn't obligate the city to do anything, but rather it just identifies anything that we found that could be relevant to developing your transportation system plan or developing your policies and transit policies, for example.
Okay.
Doesn't obligate us. Okay.
This doesn't obligate us, but the strategies and goals
Right.
further in our discussion tonight are the obligation.
Right. This is just a background policy document. And again, it's important to include in your documentation because it's how you got to where you are today.
Mhm. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand all the pieces of this very large puzzle. Were there any other, like, volume 2 questions that people came up with during the process? All right, moving forward to volume 1. This is, I don't know any other process other than just starting at the beginning, going through, and if anybody popped up with something that was on a particular page or section, just pop up, because I'm a little detail oriented, and I wrote it all down in page number order, and I gave copies to staff before time so that they weren't completely blindsided. I think Chris maybe had 15 minutes to answer. Brad had a little bit longer. So in what I think we should all be carrying around with us when we're doing planning, at least that's what Brad told me this evening, is volume 1 of the TSP. And to this point, page 5 of the preface talks about traffic calming. And my question, and I think question of people in the audience, was how does a citizen request that? And does it need to be called out in more detail, the process? How someone goes from looking at this document to where they go to the staff to say, traffic calming as in your TSP can be incorporated in my neighborhood in this manner.
Can I take a stab at that?
Oh, sure.
I don't think it's appropriate to have that level of detail in TSP. That's more of a process of policy, sort of like the comp plan versus the development code or an internal process. And as I mentioned, right now, we're working on developing a more comprehensive and robust traffic calming program. I don't think it's, even once we have that, that would be something that maybe is endorsed by council. Maybe we have something in the municipal code to define that process, but I don't think it's appropriate to have it in the TSP.
Not even in our goals and policies in the comprehensive plan to have a safer corridor and...
Sure, I mean, I certainly, as a goal or a policy that you want to establish a traffic calming program, have a traffic calming program, but to identify how someone complains and goes through the process.
Or at least a strategy within this process. We have a lot of other strategies that tell us what we're going to be planning for. It seems like we ought to be able to put a strategy
and what we do have is, of course, in Volume 2, standards around which types of traffic calming treatments are appropriate on which types of facilities. And those standards came from Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. They went around to all their cities and counties in their service area and coordinated on what was acceptable for their primary response routes and what wasn't, based on impacts to their travel time and safety to occupants and ambulances, things like that.
Okay.
And I might just quickly add, you do have an existing policy that talks about traffic calming. It's Goal 3, Policy 10. The city will establish and maintain a set of guidelines and standards for traffic calming measures to retrofit existing streets and as part of land use review. So, and that's existing.
And so the corresponding strategy we could add that says we will implement a traffic calming, city will implement a traffic calming plan.
One point that goes along with that chapter, that it says here that the using engineering judgment by the Sherwood Public Works Department. It should be just the Sherwood Engineering Department or Community Development Department.
Okay.
You want your name in there?
No.
By
Bob. An extension.
Here's his phone number.
Direct home phone.
So the Sherwood, it's engineering or community development? Engineering.
I would say at this point, if we can leave it under the community development, because
Okay.
part of this could be part of the planning process and part of the engineering process working together to come up with.
So are we still on page 5 of the preface?
Yes.
Correct.
I only want to be clear because when I go to council, I need to say, this is the proposal with the proposed amendments from the planning commission. So I have to be clear what I'm
This
going
isn't
to
being
be.
reprinted then, I take it.
This is what you've done? What's that?
This
No,
is
it's not
not
being reprinted.
Okay, so we're looking at preface, page 5, changing public works to community development.
Thank you.
And at the top of that same column, the last sentence on street cross sections, it says, in constrained situation, a design exception may be allowed through a variance procedure. And I believe within our code, variance procedure is a defined process having to do with land use applications. And in this context, the street cross sections would go through a design exception process through the engineering department.
Correct. And if you had the engineering design manual, it would be under section 145, page 37 of this tome, and it goes through and it describes how to apply for a design variation, what the process is to internally, how we review it, how we have to respond, and if there is an appeal process, there is also an appeal process to go through. If they don't like what my judgment, comes back and kicks it right upstairs to the city manager and then finally city council, with that being defined in the design manual.
Right, and I just think for the language, since we have variance procedure as a defined process within our code, we should be clear that this is a design exception process. Is that okay? That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Oh, you're worth so much more than that.
She gets the middle chair too.
I have this candy.
Thank you. So moving forward, in volume 1, I'm just whipping right down to page 18 if someone doesn't have anything. Oh, wait. I answered my own question. These are Metro's assumptions. So then I'm just going to go right to page 37, which are the projects list. Wow, that book went through real quick, didn't it? Page 37, D24, lists in the short term Sherwood Boulevard intersection modifications, and I think that's what the testimony was about earlier. And I'm calling it out as a concern. The way it was explained to me is technically this is the right project. So I ask, as citizens of Sherwood, is this politically and emotionally the right project to remove the light? I mean, these are people providing technically correct answers from Metro, from ODOT, from all their computer models. But just like we removed Villa Road from the last time the TSP came through, is this a project that we believe in the short term we should be removing that light?
I have concerns about removing the light at this time. I'd like to see the impact of the new road that's going in off 12th and Sherwood. I know that it may be an eventuality, but I'm very concerned about the potential impact on the two retail areas. I mean, they're already having empty spaces and they are highly visible. And if you look at some of the areas, I mean, look up 99 at some of the areas where they've cut off access.
Now, this is the Sherwood Boulevard, the McDonald's light.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Same issues.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, I drive that all the time, and I mean, it's not backed up terribly right now.
it's not in turning left to get to Old Town from Albertsons. I don't know how else you would do it unless you go back out through Walmart. There's no road that allows access, and so
Well, you'd have to cut through the neighborhood.
yeah,
Yeah, you'd have to go back around. You'd have to kind of pre-planned before we ever saw where it is. So for anybody who's not familiar with that,
You couldn't do it.
well, you
Coles and loop around.
No.
Well, no, you couldn't go to-
The removal of the light makes that a right in, right out only. You can't actually cross over to Coles because
Right.
that opens up.
You'd have to go right across 99,
Right.
loop around past
Right.
Safeway, back through Tualatin, up through Wilsonville.
and it was
Basically, the
Salem.
project tries to correct an existing deficiency in how traffic is backing up at the highway light through the intersection at peak times during the day. We actually, when Dutch Brothers went in, we actually had to have them do some improvements to prevent turning movements
Yeah.
and traffic stacking out onto Century Drive because of that intersection right there. Otherwise, we'd have cars potentially during the morning commutes, afternoon commutes, working their way back out through the intersection, and then it just stops. Now, the correct, the identified project solution to this is to move stuff around and take it out. Is this going to get worse? We don't know. I think it would be more appropriate to say is it a short-term project versus a medium-term or even a long-term project?
I agree. I
And
agree.
so
I don't think it's a
agree.
short-term project.
because if you look at how long the old GI Joe's was empty, I mean, it took years to get something in that space. I'd like to see, and even now their parking lot's not that busy, but I'd like to give them a chance to survive.
Okay, so consultants, we request that D24 be moved. Long-term, short-term, what's the consensus of the commission?
I think long-term.
This-
It doesn't look like there's long-term choices.
The long-term are aspirational. So short-term means that there's pretty certain monies
Conservatively funded.
based on the previous so many years. Medium-term means, yeah, we'll probably get it based on a little bit more money that is potential. Long-term means that it's going to be kind of hard to fund this. And these projects can be reprioritized by the council at their next budget. So even if
Sorry, and I was going to add that. I think that it's important to understand the context of the capital improvement program, and when Bob is preparing the CIP, the capital improvement program, we look at how much money we have, how much projects cost, priorities, impact, need at the time, sort of put all those together. We're actually going to be trying to make that process a little bit more publicly inclusive, so that we're prioritizing projects for the 5-year CIP based on, the TSP, but also public input as well. And I guess I'm just saying that to make, if something is short term and there's no public support and there's no dire need, it won't be included in the 5-year CIP. If something is long term and we have people screaming for it, it might be moved up. And so just kind of keep that in mind as you're identifying the priority, that there's also that additional process that comes into play.
But I guess in perception, this is a $900,000 project that if the funding were moved to an aspirational list rather than a conservatively funded, we've got other potentially more bang for your buck, more appealing projects than this one. So
Well, I kind of agree with Beth. I think it might be interesting to see, maybe because there'll be some other lights coming online and maybe some other lights changing positions, and maybe kind of see how that affects the overall traffic pattern before we jump in. So maybe not long term, but maybe medium, for example. And I think Julia's right. At any time, if the citizens come and say, Council, we request this, it can be bumped up.
Mhm.
I just don't want to leave it on the short-term list.
I
I'd like
don't
to bump
either.
it down.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I would agree.
D24.
And I would remind you, besides other roadway projects, you have a major retail development on the east end of that corridor that during the traffic study for that, Century Drive, 12th Street, was a key corridor connecting to that area. So when that development opens, you may see additional demand going through there.
I'm not comfortable killing off one existing retailer in favor of another. So I'd like to see how it actually plays out.
Yeah. And I was just referring to you may see,
Yeah, the
you may
left
learn
that'll be
things from the
changed.
volume.
Oh, I
besides
think
just
we
regular
are.
projects.
I think when I turned left onto Century Drive from Tualatin Sherwood Road to kind of check it out last week. And I can just see come December or the day after Thanksgiving,
It's going to be hard to get.
it's going to be crazy.
Traffic calming.
And if you come back out, there's no way to get out. Make a right, but you can't make a left.
Right. So, see.
I think we're all going to be surprised to see how things kind of settle.
We see the benefit of the light on Century Drive, but don't see that it's a short-term project that can be done right now without further roads in place that will enable people to go forward or turn left to get to that retail establishment. So, at least medium term.
Yeah.
And then the other projects that I had, it's just a conflict in the plan itself. On page 39, project P44, it's listed as a medium term, but it was noted that it was going to be changed to a short term.
It was supposed to be changed to short term. It just
Okay, so
got lost on the editing room floor.
P44.
P44, pedestrian.
Page 39. Yeah.
It's the Oregon Street Sidewalk, which is also part of the Ice Age Tonquin Trail project.
Correct.
So they'll probably be checked off at the same time. And then I'm going to page 44, which is the transit plan. It's a new figure 14. It's right before section 8. There's no actual numbers on the page, I don't think. So my question is, was this a draft presented to the TAC or the CAC?
And I'll let Garth correct me if I'm wrong because he knows the details, but I believe the map itself wasn't presented. It was our way of trying to graphically represent the strategies we talked about in our committee meetings with options for enhancing local service, providing connections to Tualatin.
So again, what does this represent? Local
These
service?
are routes where local service would be an option. So if there was a local service study done to see where you would want to have local transit routes, these are the locations that you would prioritize looking at.
So not TriMet, but local. A smart bus,
Yeah.
like
it
South
could,
Metro.
It could be local TriMet service. It could be local city service. But this is just showing those kind of larger arterial collector roadways that might be appropriate for a transit service route.
So how does this impact a developer when they come in and we have a transit system potential enhancement identified? Does this get a wider road on that, or does it, like I look at Brookman, Old Highway 99?
I can say that if I saw this, I would just point it out to TriMet when I send it over for their notification and see what kind of response. If they come back and say, well, we're not going to provide any transit service on Hanley, that's the end of the story. Until there's transit actually within a quarter of a mile of a site, we generally don't require anything of a developer. And even then, we don't necessarily require anything of a developer. We send it out to TriMet and say, what do you have planned for this area? We have transit, or we have a development within a quarter mile. And sometimes they respond, and 99% of the time they don't.
Okay, so mainly it's just the blue line that's already existing that impacts current development.
Correct.
And that provides opportunity when or if TriMet decides to connect us to Tualatin.
It's a flag, and obviously there's talk in the service enhancement plan of looking down Tualatin Sherwood Road, Sunset YMCA. I don't know if Sunset's an option, but somehow getting to the YMCA. And there may be opportunities. On the blue line, we've had some developers that would be affecting that or impacting that, but TriMet already has stops on there where they want and they don't want anymore, so there's really no need for further additions. It's more of an indicator to us.
Okay.
Yeah, the other way I could see it coming into play, back to your neighborhood traffic calming discussion earlier, if there was a proposal to do any sort of modification to any of these roads that would narrow or put in, I'll use the term, vertical deflection devices, speed humps, things like that, you'd probably want to cross-reference your transit routes and make sure you're thinking about that potential when you're doing those decisions.
Okay. All right. So then I'm flipping to 55 and 57, which I think I'm going to go 57 first. It says that it talks about truck routes, and that's ODOT and Washington County identify Highway 99 and 12th and Sherwood Road, Roy Rogers as truck routes, and that the V over C we can't limit that. But on the page before, which, ODOT and Washington County, there are 0.9 and 0.99 of capacity. But then on the page before, we have mobility targets in the right-hand column for the Sherwood Town Center to be 1.1 V over C. So how does that, we're saying that in the town center, which is 12th and Sherwood Road and Highway 99, that we're going to allow it to be over capacity because it's part of the town center, but ODOT and Washington County say we can't do that on their roads.
The 1.1 is part of Metro's RTP, and it should also match the Oregon Highway Plan for that area. So it's an overlay that would supersede the freight route mobility standard for ODOT. Washington County, who manages 12th and Sherwood Road, doesn't necessarily comply with what what Metro has in the RTP. So if you're doing something on 12th and Sherwood Road, Washington County standards trump. If you're doing something on the highway system, their standards apply, but they are consistent with Metro in this overlay area where the town center is. And then the town center also applies to a much larger area, of course, now, and you have a new standard there. So the freight routes outside of the town center has a certain standard. Within the town center standard applies.
So the town center trumps it.
Yep.
And the town center, I just ask it because I have no other way. Are we setting ourselves up for failure? Because we're setting it up. The standard is 0.99 and 0.9 for Washington County and ODOT. And we're saying we're going to allow 1.1, which is
More than we should.
1 is 100%. So we're allowing more than 100% capacity in our town center.
Why would we do that?
Well,
And
and you're doing it on facilities that aren't yours, so they really have the control, and that's what those agencies have said they want to plan for. Because to do otherwise, they would have to spend a lot more money that they don't have to avoid those congestion issues. And it's their management of their system and how they choose to do that. So planning for more than capacity of ECO 1.1, what that means is they're anticipating demand will spread into multiple hours now. People will ultimately start changing their driver behavior. You'll see more congestion in those peak periods. You'll see queues getting longer, and that's part of the system outcome that they're expecting.
So just to clarify, so we're actually they're planning for the congestion in order to save the money that it would cost to relieve it for our small town.
And I wouldn't say it's just for Sherwood. That's their statewide and regional policy.
Okay.
Also, to keep in mind, planning for that type of congestion, actually building for it, may give you facilities that are much larger and would kind of destroy your downtown as well. So there's a flip side to that. You can build and try to build your way out of congestion, but the roadways that you end up with are very
Wide.
That
makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Just make 99 8 lanes across, and we could drop it down to 0.7.
There you go. Okay. I guess I was just reading a concern into it.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand.
Both sides of the...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. Yeah.
That is mentioned several times, the footprint of a change to an intersection. It's mentioned several times in the plan. And the effect, when you rated everything a -1, a 0, a +1, when you were rating the possible solutions, some of those I went, what? And then I thought, well, that would mean to get it, because some of those solutions were ranked lower than the other ones, but they were more palatable because it was less infrastructure coming into the city. It was less of a build out. And I appreciated that. If that means 1.1, longer queuing times, but it's better than having 8 lanes.
Okay. Thank you. That gives a good perspective on it. Okay, and the last one I have is right at the end of the document, and it's my 2 greatest concerns about projects going forward, and making sure that the language allows the citizens in 6768, it's transit service enhancements, and it talks about, again, high capacity transit. I was just trying to beef it up a little bit. The last paragraph says, while it has been determined that high capacity transit will not be provided from Portland to Sherwood through the current Southwest Corridor planning process, it is possible that high capacity transit to Sherwood may be reconsidered in the long term. I just thought adding language that it would go through another public process somehow.
Is this something we're saying, or is this something they're saying to us? And so we put it in the book.
We put it.
I know it's in there, but how did we get that?
How did we get that?
How did we? Who decided that we were at some point going to reconsider that?
Yeah. Well, I guess you just have to leave it open.
I think I can chime in on that. I think the issue originally came up when Commissioner Simpson said, hey, high-capacity transit isn't coming to Sherwood. And so I think that, and I'm not positive, but I think this additional language was recognizing the fact that there may be additional processes that look at it long-term. And I think it's totally fair and valid to maybe say, acknowledge that if it is considered, it would be some other regional planning process. It's not going to happen just because we've got a sentence in the TSP.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's consistent with the town center planning work that we did, and we explored what made the town center look like if you had a high-capacity transit route and didn't want to preclude that from happening if it were to ever come back to Sherwood.
Years is a long time. So add something like subject to at the end of that sentence, and that, subject to further.
Or which would require, or something like that.
Yeah, that's good. Which would so we're on page 68, the end of that. May require. Which may require.
Or shall. I like shall.
I'm going with Chris.
I think the issue is that they don't want it to may require. What you're wanting to say is
will.
If high capacity transit is reconsidered in the long term, it will require. I mean, I think we're acknowledging, and I think you're saying as a commission and ultimately as a council, we don't want it to be snuck in under the rug. We want there to be a public process, and
shall require.
So I think that
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that there would be, but I'd like to go on record saying that that's how we felt about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So something to the effect of which will require a separate public process.
Yes.
Additional.
Which will require a separate process. Thank you. And then this one, I think it's on page 67. It's the Brookman Road and the concept plan. And it's mentioned several times in the plan that Washington County wants to designate Brookman Road an arterial. And the Brookman Road concept plan, from its beginning, and what was approved by council,
was 3 lanes.
Envisioned that as a collector route. And we it has a whole bunch of streets connecting to a collector. And I personally cannot support a transportation plan that calls out for an arterial when it's going to set this concept plan up for failure. We need to have a revisit of this concept plan. And I don't know, because you can't put so the spacing difference, the spacing that we planned this concept area at was a collector that would have 100 to 400 foot spaced roads. If Washington County makes it an arterial, that is 600 to 1,000 foot spacing, which, looking at the Brookman Road concept plan, means that there's going to be a lot of people driving through small neighborhoods to get to a very big road, and that planning was never intended to be at that. And so, consultant, how do we resolve
Oh,
this
great
problem?
consultant.
Oh, great.
Well, our issue is that it's not inside the city boundaries. It's inside our UGB. It's
Correct.
out in the county, so it's kind of their game. However, I feel like I think they're sort of telling us, and thou shalt designate this a 5-lane highway, and I'm not in favor of it at all.
And if we have to pay for, I mean, can we designate it a collector and then do the same process that Washington County did when they wanted to change a local street to a collector, as they come before us with their plan on how to change it from a collector to an arterial?
They have jurisdiction over the roadway, so I think their plan designation would trump what you have in your plan.
Okay.
I believe.
Well, we
Depending
can't
on
put whatever we want in our own plan.
Well, it depends on whatever action is in front of you when you're making a decision about what to do with that roadway. But if it's outside of the city and a proposal came forward, material in their plan, those are the standards that would apply.
And that's fine as long as the land stays in Washington County, because the development will be done at county standards. The minute that this area is annexed into our city comprehensive plan and this Brookman area plan will be in play. And so when it's annexed, if it came through in the November election, the area that would annex, would it not be then zoned based on the comprehensive plan? And now we have a conflict. We have an arterial road with a collector standard on our zoning.
Yeah, there's a definite conflict in there.
This is one of the issues that's at play Mr. Wyman spoke about. And absent an agreement between the city and county, both comprehensive plans can't apply at the same time. It's
Right.
one or the other. As long as the road is outside of the city, the county's comp plan applies. If it comes into the city and it's not a county road, and I don't know what the status of the road is.
It's county road.
Okay, so some roads automatically transfer upon annexation. Others are subject to a transfer process that is subject to some new statutes. It will depend on if the county transfers jurisdiction over the road to the city upon annexation, then the city's comp plan applies.
Well, I would argue, though, that the zoning isn't for a collector road. What you're referring to is in the concept plan, the
Street
the
spacing.
street spacing that was illustrated in the concept plan shows spacing much closer together, and certainly it was envisioned
A collector,
that
right?
it was going to be a collector road.
it's just a
That
concept.
said, if it comes in and is an arterial and the county standards apply, it's still zoned what it's zoned. You just would have wider spacing. That said, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to look at whether or not the zoning that is then on an arterial may not be the most appropriate zoning anymore, but it doesn't
But
negate
looking,
it.
I understand, and I was part of the Brookman Road, and so unfortunately the people aren't, they're not looking at the same maps I'm looking at. I'm looking at the Sherwood plan and zone map that has all the zoning listed out from the comprehensive plan, and where these proposed roads are, and language on the plan that says a significant challenge to the development of the Brookman Road area is providing connections to the surrounding street network without degrading livability on residential streets. So what are we doing when we created this? We created this plan with the anticipation of the light industrial, the neighborhood commercial. We put a lot of density right next to Highway 99, anticipating that people would be able to access it. If they can't access Highway 99, then they're going to be going up Middleton Road to get to Sunset, or they're going to go, 1,000 feet down the road through residential. The plan sets a great concern that we're going to be sending commercial traffic through neighborhoods to get to 1,000-foot space street off Highway 99.
And that's one of the things that in my discussions with the county that we basically said is not going to happen. You cannot maintain county arterial spacing standards with that development already concept plan down there with the spacing requirements. Normally, if you had something like that going on, what you would do is do a parallel collector status road that would connect up to the arterial and in the appropriate spacing levels. That's not going to work there.
There isn't that
space is
spacing.
It's too narrow
It's too narrow.
a property. It has topographic constraints all over the place. The vegetated corridor cuts it down. It
railroad.
chops it up. The railroad does another chop. There's no way you could hit the spacing standards if you use the county's true arterial spacing standards and try to develop that area. It's just not going to happen, which is why and the other aspect is that the identified southern connector really isn't set up to go there. They want to bring it much further south.
Right.
But they can't because that's not where the political line is drawn.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like it's a roadway that's been overlaid with for political expediency.
Yeah.
That we both agree that this roadway is going to go here. However, it really wants to go further south. But we've identified this, and even if they said, well, it's going to be 20 years before we could actually do the southern connector, what are we going to do with all these road connections? I'm sorry, guys. We're going to develop, and the spacing is going to be such that maybe you won't have 30 or 40 local road connectors, but you're not going to have one based on spacing, or none. It's going to have to be a compromise, and we'll work through that. That's why it was a redefinement area. What does it do to the concept plan for the Brookman area? We're going to have to look it over again.
Yeah, and I think that context, Bob, is really important to understand here. This is the I-599 connector Southern Arterial that the county's talking about, and they believe it's important from what I understand. We have support for roads to bypass the city as a strategy in this plan. They have an issue. It's not just political. They can't show that line being south of Brookman Road because it's outside the urban growth boundary. So they can't adopt their plan with another alignment in it. They have to put it on Brookman. So the county's kind of backed into a corner on where to show the arterial. And so they want to move ahead with that arterial there, but they put some policy language together acknowledging that there's a functional need for both types of roads in this area. One, to move regional traffic, and the need to provide access to Brookman Road. Because they can't do that right now, they would say Brookman should be an arterial, but they'll have to look case-by-case basis as development comes in and deal with it. And they can't legally landlock properties and say there's no access, otherwise you're buying the property. So there's going to have to be compromise done until that additional planning work is done. They may have to pursue a goal exception to move the arterial alignment south of Brookman if that's where they decide it really needs to go.
Chris, why are they even going through the process of designating only a portion of that road? If they don't, do they have a plan for the southern extension to I-5?
From 124th east, they do. From Ladd Hill to 99 is this. The part in between goes through Clackamas County that they don't have control over. So there's that gap that still has to be worked out. The RTP does have the entire corridor in the plan.
Where does that road go from Ladd Hill through
it's
the mountain?
Yeah, when the I-599 connector study was done, it's a fairly straight east-west alignment across the whole area. Major grading work to get through the hills. Yeah.
Wow.
So the language that you see here, I would say it's about, 2-3 months of banging our heads together against the county planners. But it really is the best we can do with trying to provide some assurances to what the expectation of the developer is going to be, and still giving us the flexibility of changing things to meet those needs as they occur. And still get both transportation system plans, both the county and the cities, to match up so that we're in lockstep a little bit. It's a difficult situation, and I think we've got the best we can do.
So we can't just say we support a bypass route that will take traffic out of populated areas. We can't say that at the same time be against the idea. Well, I guess because it's not our road.
That's the problem.
We don't really have a lot to say.
Well, I guess my concern is that this language says the long-term intent is to reevaluate the Brookman Addition concept plan. What's long-term? After we annex this whole area in and then we go back to the citizens that own the property, the landowners down here, and say, I know you annexed in under this comprehensive plan, but we're going to redo it. I mean, I think that's a staff level and a funding issue, is to redo the concept plan to match the arterial.
And I don't have a good answer. I can say that it could happen at any time. It could be something that, when this is done, there's discussions with the county and Metro and DLCD, and we somehow get some funding to reevaluate it. It could be done concurrent with some annexation discussions. It could happen afterwards. I mean, replanning and rezoning happen all the time. They happen inside city limits. They happen, you reevaluate. We update Old Town Plan. We just updated our Town Center Plan. So it's not unheard of to do that after it's come in. Certainly that's something that, as we're talking with property owners who are looking at annexing, I think that's something that we would have to have a conversation about. But I don't have a clear path of how we get there. Those are all things that we'd be considering.
I might feel a little more comfortable if we put at the bottom of page 67, in the interim, to provide for future flexibility, Brookman Road has been designated as an arterial with a 5-lane right-of-way needed, and indicate that that's by the county. That they're the ones identifying that as an arterial.
Okay.
So
Is recognized
not
that
that
you-
we're doing it, but the county
Right.
Based on county requirements.
As required by the county or
as
as
required
requested.
by the county, and if at such time whoever said the process is, if it becomes annexed in the city and there's a process by which the county gives the road to the city and then we have control of the road in our own community, then we can revert to access spacings that comply with what our concept plan is. Or can we ask the county to consider giving us the road when it becomes annexed? I mean, I don't know if we want the road.
Put that in here, though.
I mean, how?
So Chris and Bob both have that "it's not going to happen" look on their face. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
If they're preserving the roadway corridor,
they're not going to
for
give
the
us
southern
control of it.
arterial, just in case nothing else happens. I would be surprised if they want to hand the road over.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, if they do get the southern corridor further south, they may be amenable to it
So-
if the city ever wanted to get it.
So in their interim, to provide future flexibility, Brookman Road has been designated by request of Washington County. How's that?
The request?
Has been designated as an arterial at the request of Washington County. Is that?
Well, by the
Certainly
county.
request.
Yeah.
So the request by the county.
As an arterial
Because-
by the county.
Yeah, because it's not our road, so we have to. They can do whatever they
County.
want with it. We're just letting people know it. They designated an arterial, and we just have. We're referencing that.
Right.
Okay.
But they didn't make a request.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
just,
requesting. It is.
it just is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, they made a request to the city to have this
Okay.
language and coordinate, but in their plan, they are designating it as an
It had-
arterial.
okay, so
And just to add, we're required to have our TSP be consistent with the county TSP and consistent with the Metro RTP. So, and we certainly talked with the county as they were, initially saying what they were proposing to do with the arterial. At the end of the day, they have to be consistent, and we can't adopt something that is blatantly not consistent with the county's.
And they're not willing to incorporate our concept plan within their document.
Not.
I think what they've done is
They're
they've worked the flexibility into it, which allows our concept plan to be looked at and to somewhat be, they can't be inflexible in their application of their own standards when looking at the concept plan. They have to sort of bend over backwards as far as our development goes in that area when they're looking at the review of that road development.
Yeah, and it is a little different than the ideal for that corridor. The eastern half of it, from 124th over to I-5, when they amended their TSP to bring in that part of the corridor, there was specific language saying there will be no access to that part of the roadway except at a few arterial street connections. So that's what the desired function is of the roadway. And so with the language they proposed for Brookman Road and Sherwood, they've realized they can't do that type of access control at that location.
And so do we have a copy of their language that's exactly their
Yeah,
language?
we cut and paste from documentation we got from them into this.
There you
So
go.
that while refinement planning has not yet been completed, access spacing and other requirements will need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So this is Washington County's concession to us to allow us to incorporate the Brookman concept plan as best possible.
This language is what we worked with together with them to come up with. That was something that was
Well,
acceptable and palatable.
I think that's a triumph, considering we don't even own the road. That's pretty good, Bob. Way to go.
So other than, we could still add that one caveat about it being owned by Washington County, or by
Designated by the
designated by
county.
Washington County.
Designated by Washington County. So you got that for, I'm at the end of volume 1. So that just,
9:20.
so that just goes back to there's goals and policies and code amendments that are part of the meeting packet that we got, that 100 and
Before we go there,
100 million.
I have a
Oh.
comment and question on, and it kind of reflects the written comment that we received on the last page, number 4. Langer Farms Parkway should have considered 4 lanes rather than 2 at Home Depot. I see on our project list for transportation that there's D12, which extends Langer west, I think beyond 99. Did we ever consider widening that Langer Farms Parkway to accommodate the growth from the Walmart coming into town and the other traffic that's going to be created by that?
Yeah, both in this process, we looked at the volume demand projected for 20 years on that roadway corridor, and even back when it was Adams Avenue North at the time, Langer Farms Parkway North. When that project was designed and we were doing the concept plan for that northern area, we took into account all the potential development in the area and forecasted out 20 years to see if there was enough demand to warrant going to a 4 or 5 lane corridor through there. We found at the time there really wasn't that much demand to use that as a shortcut route. It was primarily providing access into those areas is what all the models were projecting. And so at that time, the decision was made to design it as a 3-lane roadway, 2 to 3 lane roadway.
So from Oregon Street all the way past Walmart to Home Depot, and none of your modeling projected any of that to be greater than 1 lane each way.
Correct.
Surprising.
That is very surprising to me.
And if we question that, what do we do?
Now, you can question any part of the modeling.
The road's already built.
The road's already built, but I think it should be at least part of the long-term plan that we consider that as a project if the development warrants it. Of course, we don't know that yet, but
Designating it a larger road would then, when areas develop, like if the Catholic Church property or what's just south of Walmart were to develop, then they'd have to leave a larger right-of-way than's currently dedicated, correct?
That would be correct. If you adopted it as a larger corridor, you would probably require right-of-way dedication from future developments. We wouldn't have a technical basis for justifying that, and I don't know if there's any issues with that aspect of it.
I think there is. We can provide you with the technical basis of why we're doing these roadway designations the way they are. To just say we want an arterial status road or larger, just because we feel that there might be more business development there without the support to back it up, leaves us open, I think, to a lot of challenges at all sorts of levels, well beyond what the Planning Commission be looking at. I think you could definitely suspect that the first thing would be an appeal And they'd probably win too, without the justification backing it up.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason we're not seeing that huge demand there, we did look at that in those studies, was the link from 12th and Sherwood to 99 North, that pattern. So if you're coming from Tualatin to Sherwood to turn right and go back up the highway towards Tigard, that's not a huge demand. Coming south from Tigard to go back towards Tualatin on Tualatin Sherwood Road, that's not a huge demand. The major regional demands through there are crossing the highway to go Roy Rogers or down south to Newburgh. Those are the demands that dominate that whole area. And so it was just kind of all those origins and destinations, the least dominant of all the traffic streams there. So that's why the models didn't show more demand doing that.
Personally,
Well, that
I'm
makes
using it
sense.
for Home Depot.
Yes,
I'm gonna
I
plan
know
to-
many people from our part of town are going to Home
Depot.
Oh, the road will certainly get utilized by local trips, but local trips generally aren't enough to trigger a multi-lane roadway. That's why it's a collector status. It's the through regional traffic that pushes you to the 5-lane road.
I think people are going to coming from Tigard are going to take a left and come into Sherwood that way, as opposed to going all the way to the light, because we're talking about the stack all the way back to the junkyard. They're just going to get off as quick as they can. That's where I think it's going to be a through street.
The other thing to keep in mind is in all these long-range projections, 124th is going south of 12th and Sherwood down to Tonkin and into the North Wilsonville area. So all that Tigard, northern Tualatin demand will use the 124th corridor to go north and south through the area. So that's probably part of why it's not projecting that connection to be so attractive.
Keep people out of Sherwood,
Mhm.
and that'll be part of almost a bypass, because they're going to cut down 124th.
Right.
And get-
Okay.
So then, talking about Tonquin Road, is there upgrades to Tonquin Road because of the way the road is?
The regional transportation plan, Washington County's plan, all have upgrades to Tonkin Road. Not to a 5-lane roadway, but a more standard 2-lane roadway, and further east as you get into Tualatin's planning area, it would be upgraded to an urban standard, probably 3 lanes, sidewalks, bike lanes, the whole thing.
And we have it designated as an arterial, correct?
Mhm.
All
Thank
right.
you.
That's great.
One other item that I was looking at that I thought I should bring up is on page 5 of the preface. Street cross sections under standard transportation standards. It says that the design requirements in Sherwood Engineering Design Standards per the functional class and the TSP. It's basically talking about the street sections. And I think we're a little bit backwards here. The cross-section requirements need to be part of the TSP.
Uh-huh. Oh,
My
yeah.
design manual takes those, and I concur with them completely, and I might even show the same details again in a detail that I throw in my manual. But I am following the TSP as far as what the standard for road sections, as far as their designation and their physical standard is going to be. So the details, figure 8.2 to 8.6, I think, those need to be a part of the TSP and located within the structure of that item.
So, preface 4, street cross sections. New streets shall meet the design requirements in Sherwood's transportation system plan per the
As-
functional class.
Yeah, I'd
Per
say
figure.
per figure,
And
per the
then-
figures attached at some point in there.
And then these get added someplace in there?
Yeah, those get inserted into the standards chapter.
These are the ones we got mailed to us, right?
Right.
Emails.
So we're going to change preface 5 to incorporate the cross sections into the TSP document, and we're going to change the language on, where'd it go? Figure 8.4 from Adams Avenue to Langer Farms Parkway.
Correct.
And so these cross sections will be added into volume 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Where is the language changing about?
Preface page 5, the bottom of the first column.
Under transportation standards, under street cross sections.
New streets shall meet the
Design requirements in the TSP.
period.
And there's no question about why I'm putting that out there, is there?
No, I thought
It's flipped.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
my design standards are technical at a certain level, but I've got to base it on something, and this is what I base it on.
This says the TSP is based on yours.
Yeah, that's kind of backwards.
It's all about you, Bob.
See appendix 1.
All right, so you guys will incorporate language to put it in here someplace.
Okay.
A new section.
Yes.
All right. That leaves the big old 120 pages that they sent us in our Planning Commission package. I know. Comprehensive goals and policies is the first section, and it starts on page 53 if you look at section A,
Commissioner
which looks like a
Simpson.
bunch of Scrivener updates.
The page numbers.
What?
I was confused about the page numbers, and you were looking at.
I'm looking at the staff.
The packet.
The packet because
Page numbers.
That's what
Yeah.
because the page numbers go from 1 to
Right.
whatever. Otherwise, they're multiple numberings.
And luckily, you've noticed that their goal and the strategy, so I can follow along. I've got it.
You give her a copy of what I gave you.
I'm with you.
Oh, good. So, just starting like we did before, goals and policies. Does anybody? Where's the first? I'm in goal 1, page 57. There's strategies 4. I just thought it was a duplicate of goal 5. Plan for array of transportation assets. I mean, maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, 57.
Page 57 of the Planning Commission packet. Isn't strategy 4 the same as goal 5? Convenient transportation to all resident, special transit options for elderly and disabled.
I don't think that the strategy is as narrow as just planning for transit.
Okay.
But-
All right. And then this one's actually kind of a policy change, which is the next one, strategy 5, which is to evaluate, identify, and map existing and future neighborhoods for potential small-scale residential or commercial businesses. So this is asking us, and it calls it out in the commentary, the strategy should be reevaluated to ensure that it continues to be relevant and match priorities. I mean, this is an existing strategy. Right. Have we ever felt the need to run out and rezone something from residential to commercial? And is that a strategy that we need in the TSP?
Chair Simpson, which strategy, which page?
I'm on goal 1. It's page 57. Goal 1, strategy 5.
Of the packet.
Of the Planning Commission packet.
Page 57.
It's
I got it. Thanks.
Page 5.
Page 57. Table 2.
So
Think it's excessive, unnecessary, or?
the strategy is related to policy 4. The city shall encourage the use of more energy efficient and environmentally sound alternatives to the automobile by, and then there's a series of bullets, and the last bullet is encouraging the development of self-contained neighborhoods, providing a wide range of land use activities within a single area. So when this policy was drafted, more than likely you were looking at mixed-use neighborhoods, the possibility of having, small commercial serving a neighborhood, whether that be a convenience store or a hair salon or, something that would not attract a lot of traffic but maybe serve the needs of the immediate neighborhood. So I can imagine that the strategy was there to ensure that you were not allowing that just everywhere, that the goal was laudable, but that the implementation of it could be a little tricky, and that you'd want a little bit more assurity that you are allowing those in the right places. So you have a strategy that basically says, let's look and see community-wide where this would be appropriate. So whether or not you want to retain that, if that's no longer a interest.
It does say potential. Doesn't mean we have to do anything. That's not the best attitude to have, but But I'm thinking about, like down the road when Brookman, develops at that area near 99, that edge between residential and 99, that will be a small little, probably commercial pocket.
It's already, it's zoned that.
Yeah. So, it seems like it's not irrelevant yet.
So I think it's more for the existing neighborhood, like in the southeast Sherwood area. Would you want to it says we will evaluate and identify and map
Future neighborhoods. Yeah.
future neighborhoods. So I guess we could just keep it in there. No one raises an eyebrow at it. We'll just not even be concerned about it.
Not going to hurt anything.
So, goal 2, strategy 7, which is on page 60. It says adopt performance measures that are consistent with regional model targets. I just want to insert based on local goals or based on community goals, because I don't like always saying that we have to adopt metro standards without applying our own community values to it.
Which one are you on?
Number 7, it says we're going to adopt performance measures that are consistent with regional models. Page 60.
Okay, you said
Modal.
70.
Modal.
Oh, 60.
Oh.
Sorry.
Regional modal targets for non-single. Does it matter? I mean, do we have to have?
Well, you
We
could
have-
say, yeah. You could definitely work in the consistent with community values.
Thank
so
you.
again, that
I like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just to my mind, softens it so that our community. Okay. I struggled with this. This is goal 3, page 66. And if anybody's got pages in between that I'm missing. Number 12. It's got deleted language. And then it talks about supporting public and private development of bicycle and pedestrian improvements on map 2 of the town center plan. And I think through the town center plan, we were trying to incorporate both sides of Highway 99 and making sure that opportunities were available throughout the Six Corners area. And the original text incorporated Six Corners as a whole area. And we've identified within our comprehensive plan Six Corners as a region. And the region developed that Six Corners area developing both sides of the highway that would complement each other, not be completely different. And
Well, it does seem different. It's like we went from that to bicycles and pedestrian improvements. It seems unrelated.
yeah.
Right. I think the origin of the proposed amendment was perhaps a misunderstanding, but coming out of the town center plan, having the town center being identified as really the city's concentration zone where mixed use would be the most appropriate. And I do remember that your recommendation was not to ignore north of 99, that there should be some integration and some similar policies north of the highway. The mixed use part, I didn't know that there was strong support for that. I can see that it doesn't, what's recommended is not a one-for-one replacement, but rather I think taking advantage of the space, if you will, created by a replaced policy or a deleted policy. If the existing policy is still valid, again, if the town center plan did not supersede or did not kind of fulfill that desire, I guess, then you could keep it. But I know that policy, again, I believe was a placeholder for when Six Corners was considered the town center. And I
Right.
could be wrong. I don't know my timing well enough as the history of the evolution of that. But
And I think you're right. The mixed use overlay is probably not as relevant today as when we went through the town center plan to say, and as was testified tonight, the citizens on both sides of Highway 99 need to have the same opportunity for bicycle and pedestrian avenues, and they need to connect to each other. And we fought so hard through the town center plan to not create something separate, that Six Corners, both north and south of 12th and Sherwood Road, but east and west of Highway 99, be treated all sides, all important to get that connectivity within our community. So,
right, and I don't think that map 2 is going to satisfy that for north of the highway, although it was an important strategy for the town center plan. So maybe the focus should be, if you're happy with how the town center strategy reads, if we can add in the Six Corners language so that the support for the public-private development of bicycle and pedestrians is in there without being confined to just the map that shows the town center. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So to include the Six Corners in that desire or in that strategy.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's
Okay.
really the intent.
Okay.
The intent through the town center process was to make the whole Six Corners area
More connected.
connected on both sides of the highway.
Perhaps just to add to it and support those
Shown on map 2.
non-motorized connections to the Six Corners area or something like that at the end of the sentence. I'm not thinking very clearly on the fly, but I
Public
think
and
that's
private
what the
development of the bicycle and pedestrian improvements shown on map 2 of the town center plan, and within the Six Corners area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
both north and south of the highway.
Okay, because Six Corners is identified in the town center plan, so it's, we're going forward then. And then the only other thing I have in the goals section is in goal 5. So that goes all the way to, oh good, I didn't put the page numbers in there.
20.
Starts on page 72.
72, yeah.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
Oh, good. I have it big circles and stars on my. So 73, there's a policy 9. City supports transit service, just the end of the sentence. Again, my theme, high capacity transit, and planning for future local and high capacity transit service to neighboring cities. I don't know, does anybody else have any concern about?
So this language is already in the town center plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it came from, right?
That's correct.
Can't really, as deemed appropriate.
I think it's fine. Planning.
Okay.
Planning is doesn't tie us down to anything.
Okay. And then the last two are on page 75. Number 4 is, again, and maybe it is, explore feasible modes and locations to provide high capacity. I mean, I'm probably okay with that one, but I really have great concern over number 6, which is to explore opportunities to achieve long-term transit supportive densities in town center in order to increase viability of high-capacity transit. What that says to me is that we want to increase density, and I have great concern over that policy decision.
That was certainly something expressed during the town center meetings about not necessarily wanting more density.
And I think we felt pressured because we had to, during the town center plan, comply with a metro requirement. So I asked, are we required through this process or any other process to increase our densities?
No, not through this process. But part and parcel of having a community that can support transit is having enough people and businesses to do just that. And of course, high capacity transit is very destination oriented, and there needs to be enough there in order to support that type of investment. So it goes also with transit in general. I mean, there were also positive comments through the town center planning process that people wanted to have transit as an option, but of course it isn't free, and ridership drives demand, and demand is provided by, again, people and businesses. So it's one of those things, they go hand in hand together. Without one, you really can't have the other, at least not cost effectively by any stretch. So again, the focus has shifted since the development of the town center plan away from that high capacity notion, because it was deemed not feasible to come all the way to Sherwood. However, again, with strategy 4, that at least kind of keeps the door open for the future. 6, again, that's a policy question for you all.
I think it's too much in the other direction, in the wrong direction, that we will continue to explore so that we can increase the viability of high-capacity transit. I don't think we're in a position where we're really looking for that right now. No. So that's not really a statement I think that's relevant at the moment. We want connection, we want connectivity, with TriMet and surrounding cities, but I don't think, it didn't seem like in any of our discussions that the public was really interested in having light rail come to Sherwood.
Or increasing and putting,
or
what happened when we tried
more density?
I mean, that town center plan was 3, 4, and 5 stories, and that was really not received well.
So even though that might be listed in as strategy 4 in the town center plan, I think we should probably amend that a bit.
Or we can delete
soften it.
6.
Delete 6.
Because we have 4.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
There we go.
Yeah. It's good because 4 is the softer version of it that we were looking for.
I'm done with coach or goals and
Goals.
policies. If anybody has
I don't
any more,
think- I think the only other
I
goal-
only have. You have a goal?
The only one that I was curious about was
There's like four things.
our strategy to the requirement that we have to come up with a plan to maybe at some point have narrower roads. Oh, it's the city will re-examine local street
What
standards.
page?
It's page 67, number 19. And will explore appropriate locations within the city and circumstances under which a narrower street standard may be permitted as part of a new development. Totally understandable, less impervious pavement. I totally get that. So I guess because it's re-examine,
Consider.
we'll explore only if appropriate. I think it's probably vague enough that I don't think it's going to put us in any kind of situation, but.
Okay.
I have a question regarding that. The current road is, I believe it's Dewey, that goes from Meineke to Sunset, or excuse me, to
Yeah,
Woodhaven.
that horribly narrow.
That's
one.
it's a curved road with the houses on either side. There's only one side parking. Fridays are horrible because they put the trash cans out on the street, and there's buses and there's vehicles trying to access that road. How can we avoid something like that happening again?
And my children used to go to daycare on that street, and it's an absolute nightmare, and it's very unsafe, especially if you talk about like taking young children for walks to try to go to the park to Stella Olson. So yeah, it's top of my mind as well.
Yeah. There's a couple issues to avoid there. One is a connectivity issue that forces all that traffic onto the one roadway.
Yeah.
And the second is how you design and construct the roadway itself. The cross sections that we have in the plan and this policy here, I'm trying to understand if that's an older policy or not. Our current cross sections, we do have a narrower local street. I believe it's 28 foot wide and then a wider local street, and we have volume thresholds for when those would be appropriate. So that a roadway like Dewey, that's a higher volume local street, wouldn't be a 28-foot wide street. So I think we've kind of already addressed that with the cross sections, so that I guess it's a strategy may not be relevant anymore by the work that's already been done in the TSP.
Okay.
What happens is when you built it, you didn't know necessarily. If you build a narrow street, you won't know how much traffic it's going to have.
The review of the developments, the traffic studies done for those roadways need to consider the connectivity in the area and what the TSP forecast had indicated.
I can't imagine anybody envision Lindley and Houston being as accessed as they are either. So it's tough to think of a narrow street any narrower than we already have.
Okay, moving on.
All right.
Okay.
So on that strategy,
Do you
when
wanna
I
remove
commented
it?
that may not be relevant, do you want to remove it? Yeah.
Let's remove it. Yeah.
It's up to you. I don't think it doesn't bother me.
Well, I think we should remove it.
I think
Why not?
removing it's a good idea.
Remove it? Okay.
It's unnecessary.
Don't
Okay.
like it.
Remove 19 on page 67.
I mean, I don't think we want to end up with another situation like that.
No,
Exactly.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't, because I agree with you. It's like a minefield on certain days of the week.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and I worry about kids on that particular
Yeah.
street because there are a lot of young children on that street, and the traffic patterns there, it could be tragic one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I recall that roadway correctly, does it have landscape strips between the curb and the sidewalk? I don't
No.
believe so. And so outside of the width of the street, the new standard would have additional space where you could stack garbage cans, for example, if it was designed appropriately. So besides just the curb-to-curb distance, the overall right-of-way requirement is a little different than what you have there.
Okay, the last I have, and I guess I asked the commission to, if we push through, we have accommodated most of the concerns in our work session and through the public process. I have only 3 things other than a couple of Scrivener errors I already turned in. So.
Let's finish it.
Okay.
It's not 10 o'clock yet.
Okay.
Do it quickly.
Do it
however.
quickly. So you've got, and I've just put it for the record, page 85. That is the first annotation of TSP, so it should be spelled out, Transportation System Plan. Page 88 is my infamous and/or concerned, and I think it should be and. Page 88, top of the page.
We don't have your staff report page number, so if you could
6.
tell us.
Page 6.
Okay.
Implementation language.
So page 3. Actually, I'm kind of a detail person, and I did put both page numbers on the little thing that I gave you, 3 and 85 and 6 and 88.
You know what?
Because I'm insane.
For some reason, I do not have the same page numbers, and I
Uh-oh.
thought I
Well,
had them.
actually, we're just making it up completely. So you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep trying. Second paragraph.
Yep. And I know that Bob very well explained why we have 50 as a trigger,
Right,
and
and
100
100,
as
yeah.
a local. So I'm not going to belabor it, even though I don't remember it. It made a lot of sense last time. So then, if anybody has anything before page 92, which goes into car pool and van pool parking spaces.
Right, yeah. Let's talk about that.
I guess my concern is that seems, I don't know. I see it's existing code that will have, with more than 20 employees, include preferential spaces, but it just seems cost prohibitive. And I don't know if it's right, wrong, or indifferent to require it at 20 employees.
Well, not only that, but there's the issue of that these spaces shall be located closer to the main entrance than all other spaces except for ADA spaces.
Mm-hmm.
That seems. Is that Metro? Is that what they?
And how many?
No, actually, I think this is modified language from the model code for small cities. So we've used this before. It's it's not a lot of parking necessarily. It's a space or two next to the door, next to the employee entrance. It's intended to incentivize
Then it says
van pool and carpool, and trying to get that non-SOV
Incentivize, yeah.
percentage up, to make it
doesn't
easier
say-
for people who.
Doesn't say how many though.
Was that SOV or SUV?
That's right, SOV.
Yeah.
How did they come up with 20? Is that uniform?
Must be in the code.
You don't necessarily. It doesn't seem to make sense to provide carpool or van pool spaces for really small businesses. So your definition of small or how you conceptualize what might be the threshold for people actually doing it, I guess.
You could have 20 employees
It's
at
somewhat
Starbucks,
arbitrary. You don't want to catch the little guys, but you want to incentivize the behavior in the larger businesses that may have the opportunity to do it.
20 full-time employees though, because you could have you could have
Yeah.
only 5 people working there at a time, but there's
Well, and again, this
shifts.
will kick in at development review. You're not going to monitor this over time, for example, not in a community this small, for sure. So this is kind of a one-shot deal. If you've got a
Right.
business park, you've got a larger employer, you've got an industrial area.
Well, should
Yeah.
we look at increasing that 20 to a larger number? Is that what we're thinking? And how many are we saying they have to have?
It's
I don't know if it has it in the rest.
It doesn't have any, but I wouldn't necessarily go there.
oh, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't have the one for van and carpool.
My only concern would be the 20 employees.
What would you suggest is a good number, and why?
Well, or defining
At least
like
30.
I would
Lisa
say anywhere
said, Starbucks
30.
might have 20 employees, but they're not all there at the same time because they rotate 3-4 shifts and they got 4 or 5 employees at the same time. So that's really
Yeah, and,
Full-time employees then?
you could
maybe?
say 20 full-time employees per shift or on shift at the same time or something like that. I mean, that's a lot of people if you think about like 20 employees. I mean, the city has probably within this building maybe 40 employees.
and how many carpool?
I don't know.
Well, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe
I think
none,
20 is
but
not very many people.
potentially some could. But if we don't have a standard, you
Right.
provide one space, put it up front. Then you've incentivized somebody as a carpool. Or I'll tell you what, well, not here, but I mean, if I was working at Nike or something, or
Oh, sure, no
Or-
question
or-
if you have that size, but I
well, I
think
mean,
20 is too few.
I guess any like large, yeah. I mean, it's kind of out here in suburbia. It's probably not as prevalent as needing it in say closer in,
Yeah.
but there are.
I think
larger
20 is too small.
employees, and we're hoping to draw that in the Tonkin employment
Needs to be a
area.
bigger number.
So when
So-
you have the Tonkin employment area, and we're developing out a campus style
And there'll
development,
be more than 20 employees in those.
Yeah. So,
So-
the other threshold that
Make
comes
it-
to mind to me, and this came up when we were doing the high school master plan, is it the echo requirements where if you have over 100 employees, you have to have a TDM program. And so if that's the size of employer where a TDM program is viewed as something that's worthwhile and effective, maybe you apply that same threshold for this.
so like 100.
100.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Just
Well-
100 employees. Period.
Might be a lot.
This might be not really comparable, but under Obamacare, I think that a mid-sized business is considered someone with more than 45 employees, full-time employees. I think that's the
40 or
cutoff.
45, yeah.
Yeah, medical family leave kicks in about that time too, I think.
Mhm.
if we're-
50 or
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 50 employees, you have
50.
to have certain things up there, so.
So 50 is a nice 45 or 50 is a good threshold.
Yeah.
Well, it's 25 for state of Oregon and 50 nationally for FMLA.
Oh, is it?
25 for Oregon. Well, I'd say at least 40 full-time employees is my vote. What did everybody else think?
Sounds like a great number.
All right.
I like it better than 20.
Yeah.
I like 40.
I have
40
a question
full-time.
regarding that same kind of situation, but more on a minor scale. When some of the shopping centers around here have 15-minute parking stalls directly in front of their place of business, is it the business that offers that, or is that an incentive by the building owner?
Nothing we can
How does that
require.
work?
Yeah, I've not seen a code where it's required to have
Right.
Yeah.
minimum duration parking spots.
It's a leasing
Yeah.
incentive, I think. Like if I'm going to lease my space from you, I want to make sure that I have a designated space in front of mine,
Yeah.
and then that's a concession that they make. We don't care as long as you've provided the minimum number of parking spaces. How you manage that parking, unless there becomes a parking problem, then we might ask you to demonstrate. How are you managing the parking, or do you have enough parking spaces that are available? So.
Right, and that certainly should be part of looking at a parking management plan for the town center, for example, because you do want to prioritize it, parking spaces in front of businesses, but you'd be regulating the public right of way, not interior to a development,
Right.
and that by signing 15-minute or providing employee parking elsewhere kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see where that works in situations where it's a coming and going thing, where they're just picking something up, or there's the short term, and it allows other people to park closer to the place of business for that same reason.
Okay, I'm going to skip to the easy one, which is page, and I know you, Darcy, have no chance of being on the page that I'm on. It's
Chris
100
has
and
hooked me up
101, 100 and 101, which is just, why are we removing the maps from the TSP?
That actually, and I referred to our note, we actually had a note on that, and it's basically for ease of, not duplicating information from your plan to your code, so that when your plan updates, you don't have to go and update your code. It just seemed duplicative. I mean, if it's easier for you, or it's easier for your development community, for example, to access that information just in your code, I mean, by all means, you could keep it, but our suggestion was to not include it, and it is a bit unusual to have the maps in a code. It's less unusual to have roadway standards that is typical, but maps are a little odd.
Just curious about that.
All right.
And then I want to compliment staff, and I think it was Bob that put in the Sherwood Archer this last time, the removal of the cap ordinance would be discussed tonight. There is not a clamoring from anybody that will be affected by it. So I have to say, and Bob's explained it to us in work session why we're doing it. And so I think it's a great idea. And I think the citizens had so much notice and opportunity to raise a concern if they really wanted to be kept in there. So I thank you for taking that extra effort to get it in the Archer this time, because I think it gives me a comfort level that we're not doing something outside of what citizens would be concerned about. So the last one that I'm concerned about is pages 14 through 17, and it's all about bicycle parking facilities, and it seems cost prohibitive. We're not defining short-term and long-term.
97, 98.
90,
I have the same, all the exact
96
same.
96 is the beginning of it, so I just...
Yeah.
Wrong numbers there.
96 to 99, I think.
Well, if you look at B on page 15, 1.B, it says at least several hours. We need to define that. Was the question I had last time. How exactly, how long is it to be long-term? Because if it's long-term, that would provide racks, storage rooms, or lockers. Locate the space within 100 feet of the entrance to be accessed by the intended users, and all spaces have to be covered. That is pretty expensive.
It's hugely expensive, and then what drives this whole thing is a table on page 99 that has use categories. And I understand that this was an existing table in our code, and we might have just put it in there because Metro told us we had to in 2005 when we did this. But the use categories that are listed here don't follow the use categories that are in our code. There's no institutional public. The industrial just consists of basic utilities, which is kind of an odd thing.
Seems like we talked about this already.
We did, and it didn't change. So so what's driving how many bicycle parking spaces we have isn't in alignment with what we have existing and when we do a plan on commercial. And then the whole thing of half of short term, half again have to be long term. It's just, what are we required to put in here per Metro or RTP or RTFP or ODOT or
You need to
whatever.
distinguish between long-term and short-term. And really, the definition of long-term is by design. So it's not so much you're going to identify people who will only use a bike rack for a certain duration of time. You need to really look at it as a design issue and providing for spaces that people would feel comfortable being there for a longer period
But then
of time.
how does the developer address that issue if we don't have a specific number in there and he says several is 9 and we say several is 3? I think we have to come up with some kind of a more concrete way of measuring that.
No. Well, you basically require that they design a certain amount to be long-term. So
says
you will
50%.
design, you will have at least one long-term space.
At least one, you're right. Yeah.
Right? And of the amount that you are required to have bicycle parking, you will have a certain amount of those be long-term. And long-term then is defined by what they're required to look like, how they are designed. So
What do these racks or storage rooms or lockers, what do they look like? Are they outside? Are they attached to the wall, the outside of wall of the business?
It should be, I think you want flexibility in your code in this respect. You can definitely find examples for guidelines if you feel like you need to have an example for developers to come in and say, hey, it could be these plastic things that you put down and lock like you've seen at some park and ride or transit stations. It can be a closet, inside your doorway. It could be anything as long as somebody feels like they could leave their bike there for longer than it takes to go in and get a pop or something at your convenience store. So it's really for the commuter, for the student, for the employee that's going to do a shift and doesn't want to leave their bike out vulnerable to being taken or rained on or what have you. So again, it is a shift in thinking. It is a regional shift in thinking. It is more difficult to conceive of how this looks like in Sherwood, versus downtown Portland.
Right.
But everybody's struggling with this in the region and trying to figure out, what makes sense for their communities. But I think that the way the code is written, it has a lot of flexibility. Now, one thing that I can say about the table, it isn't unusual to roll up uses. Your parking requirements are very prescriptive. They're very detailed. They have a lot more uses. You can do that for your bike parking as well. You can use your same vehicular parking standards table and tack on bike and tack on long-term and short-term. It gets a little messy. But you can do that, and I have an example of that from another jurisdiction if you'd like to look at that. This is probably the simplest way to go right now because it is existing in code and you're not messing with the number requirement. You are only looking at design. So in thinking about these issues, we may not have hit the nail on the head with coming up with something that's perfect for Sherwood, but it is expeditious the way we've done it. And if you want to look at a different way of, and really look at the appropriateness of specific bike requirements for specific uses, that's a really a longer process.
I understand. I just had as simplest of tweaks was the last 1, 2, 3, 4 are what I think in our code are institutional and public, which are colleges, schools, community service, parks, and open spaces. So if we put a title in there that is institutional and public, that define and park and ride facilities, that kind of defines that. And to me, it's really clear. It's got that many spaces. Right above it, I don't even know what basic utilities are, but if we removed that and just made industrial, take out basic utilities and make that industrial standards, because that's what we have is industrial, and that's 2 or 1 per 40 spaces to apply to industrial. Does that make sense? And then I didn't know in the commercial category what drive-up vehicle servicing was. I mean, Vehicle
I
repair.
think it's like a Jiffy Lube.
Jiffy Lube, yeah.
Okay. I just kind of thought it was odd that we were calling out a couple things versus vehicle repair.
Well, I think otherwise that might have been captured under retail, perhaps. I don't know.
Retail sales. Oh, I see, because... So what about drive-through restaurants? I mean, this then would say... I guess we would be requiring bicycle parking at drive-through restaurants.
And long-term.
And long-term
I guess for
bicycle
employees.
storage.
Right, right.
At least one.
Yeah. Think of Burgerville or, a place like that.
Okay.
Guess
So anyway, those were my short cleanup, just so that it would match institutional, public, industrial, commercial, and residential. And
So can you say those for me?
I can, if you want to make a copy of what I wrote
Yes,
down.
I do.
So, yeah, basic utilities changes to industrial, and then the category itself, instead of industrial categories, service categories, that becomes industrial and public.
Industrial,
So-
institutional, and public.
I forgot what I said.
I can pass that. I'm still not satisfied. I don't think, but
I'm not either. I
I'm
don't-
not crazy about all of that.
It's, and I don't want, it's 10 o'clock, we're rushing through, and it seems really a cost prohibitive
One thing I would
process.
say, it does say two for one, but it does say minimum number of long-term spaces, at least 50% of the required bicycle parking spaces would be long-term. So, that does actually define a number. If you have a large
Yeah.
site, you can, I'm drawn back to a project that I worked on a long time ago where a private school was being constructed and they had to put in 40-something bicycle spaces. 20 of that having to be long-term would have probably not killed the project, but, and there's different ways of covering the bike parking. We did a cantilevered roof off of the side of the bathrooms over at Stella Olson Park to provide for some covered parking. So there is opportunities for that, but if you are concerned about cost, you might consider, like lowering the percentage of.
I see that, but so how would that be at a park where they're required to do however many spaces, and they have to be long-term, and that has to be within 100 feet of the main entrance, secured or with a security guard? I lost my paperwork, so I don't know all the language anymore, but...
I have to pipe in just a little bit. I was the council liaison to the Parks Board when the bathrooms were being built,
Mhm.
and it was a concern. There was a code, and what you're discussing was a big concern, and it almost stopped the bathrooms from being built.
The cost,
my code.
or
The bicycles.
The
The bicycle
requirement.
cover, the requirement to cover the
It is
bicycles.
costly.
And I know there are opportunities, but I'm really grateful you're discussing this.
Thank you.
Right, 7-foot minimum overhead clearance. What you're looking for?
Yeah. Thanks. So,
I would just like to say, I have a child who's biking around town quite a bit, and we're teaching him how to lock up his bike and short-term trips, but I don't see very many bike commuters, and even the next, 20 years, the sheer number, if it's 50%, it does seem like a very high threshold for us to reach. And it's very aspirational that we would have that many bike commuters in town, but,
so
And
25.
The other thing I was going to say is that although they didn't have it where I last worked,
requiring at
I
least
rode
one.
my bike to work every day, and oftentimes the employer will make concessions for the employees that are riding their bikes to work. And if you ask, I guess in a small place it's a little bit harder to do that, but
Yeah, we have bike commuters, and they just put it in their workspace.
I worked at Portland State University for 10 and a half years, and most people who commuted by bike managed to find a space inside a building for their long term. There were a lot of short term because it was that bike rack space was actually premium, but most of the bicycle commuters had more expensive bicycles, and they weren't comfortable leaving them anywhere that was
No, they want
just a covered.
They want them in with them. So
Did I hear you say 25%?
I mean,
Well,
required.
And you're requiring at least one, regardless, right?
I don't think we said a number yet.
Well,
I kind of
minimum of one, right?
So there's one required or two required, and they have to be covered.
I'd be more comfortable with 25%
Okay,
if people are.
that's page 97. Anybody else?
Well, that means
have
if somebody has 4, then one of them has to have a 7-foot clearance roof.
Which,
it has
why
to
would
be.
they do 7?
No.
You know, I mean,
That seems ridiculous.
Well,
For one
it
if I
still
could-
seems ridiculous.
I don't think they should have to have.
If I could interrupt, I think that goes back to the long-range parking bicycle provisions and how you define it. And again, that one could be a hook on the wall and a utility closet inside the building. I mean, it is flexible in that way. It's a little difficult, I think, to at site design, site design approval, to basically say, yeah, that sounds reasonable. You're not looking at the building plans yet, but you're saying, yeah, you're going to have 10 employees. You're going to have one inside. That makes sense. Now, if you get it to a larger employer and they say, oh, well, we've got plenty of space inside, then you start thinking, well, let's see the plans, so that we
Right.
know that that's provided for. So that, I think for the smaller user, it may almost be easier to accommodate inside or in a storage shed, or, I just feel like there's a lot of flexibility for how one satisfies what is secure. And again, these are just for example. I don't think by this language, it's not suggesting that Sherwood has to make sure that every development has a hired security guard for their, one sole bike commuter. So
Right, but if you got that applicant in front of you and they have to meet all the code requirements, and we're looking at a code that says provide racks in an area that's secured or monitored, located within 100 feet of the entrance.
I mean, what if it's a bank? Where are they going to stash that inside of a bank? And let's say they have to have 2 spaces, and one of them in the vault, and one of them has to be long term.
It has to be within 100 feet of the entrance.
Exactly. So is that going to? I mean, I'm just saying that is it putting a burden on certain businesses to say, okay, you have to find a spot for that one parking space or bicycle space, and it can't be. You can be outside, but you'll have to cover it.
What about
Or you have to find a place inside where they bring the bike in with the wet tires. I'm just thinking. I mean, I'll get the whole idea. We want people to bicycle more than drive where possible.
How about we say if they have more, if the requirement is more than 5 or more than 4, then this applies. If they only need to have 2 anyway, why would you have to have one of those be long term? That's ridiculous. So if they meet some minimum threshold, then 25%.
There we go.
Because if you had 4, 1 would make no sense. If you had 10,
2,
you could get 2.
So you would suggest under D, minimum number of long-term spaces, if more than 4 spaces are required, at least 25%.
Let's
Yes.
see. Let's say 8, because that would be 2. More than 8 spaces, 25% would
sorry?
be 2.
8
You
or
have
more.
to have more than 8. If
More
you have
than
8 or
8.
more spaces, then 25% would apply. Because then it make no sense to have 1 covered. That's my opinion.
Minimum number of long-term. I think he's trying to put it in this minimum number of long-term spaces. If long-term spaces exceed 2,
Why? No, I would say
So-
if you're required to provide more than 8 bicycle parking spaces, 25% of those spaces would
Have to be long-term.
long-term.
okay.
So is it 8 or more?
But I like Darcy's. I like that that's a very good idea. If they can find, I think about Target, for example.
Right.
I'm sure they have an area where, because they make all their employees come through the front door, though. They'd have to take that bike all the way to the back, and stick it on a rack somewhere. But it's not undoable, is it? It could certainly be accommodated.
So, and actually,
So-
I was just thinking about the retail for some of the larger retail centers. I mean, how many spots does Target have currently? It does seem like a fairly large jump.
1 per 20 spaces.
So
Yeah, let's say, what does Target have? 200, more than that, maybe? 200. That's
So-
1 per, is it 1 per? That's
1 per
20.
20.
Which means 5 of them would have to be long-term.
That doesn't seem unreasonable.
For Target,
No, that's
Walmart's going to have 300 employees. They'll have how many
spaces.
parking
Well, it's based on
spaces?
parking
Well, they can-
spaces.
300 parking spaces
how many.
for a supercenter? I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable for a
I don't think.
145,000 square foot facility.
No, I
know.
don't think that's unreasonable. It's just the small
Yes.
guys we're worried about, not the big guys, right?
Yeah.
We were saying it was a burden on somebody that
Right.
only had
Yeah,
to have 4 bike spaces to make one of them long-term seem silly.
yeah,
So if we say,
I like that.
I like long-term bike parking for my bike. I don't want to leave it out.
okay,
Real.
but
If they had a covered parking spot, let's say that they put bicycle parking right out here in front of City Hall and it's covered and it meets the code, are you going to park it out there or are you going to take it into your workspace?
I can't take it into my workspace, so I'd park it out there.
Is it covered outside?
It was available.
might need to just drive.
Do you have biking
I
parking
do,
spaces?
I
there?
do bike to work, and when I do bike to work, there's a closet right over there under the stairs that I put it in.
You bring it in.
You know, I biked to work for years too, both downtown and when I worked for Multnomah County. Multnomah County had it, but in both places they had effectively a fenced off area in the parking structure, just for bikes, and you had to get a special key to get in and out of it. But when I was bike commuting, I wouldn't leave, even if it was covered. I wouldn't leave my bike outside all day. I wouldn't. Not the bike I'm using for commuting. In each case, I either brought it into my office, and still when I ride today, I bring it up to my office. I don't leave it outside.
I would like to say that the Multnomah County space, that is a fantastic storage space. It's ideal because it's
No, the one when I worked at the Big Pink, it was in the heated garage. That was nice. That was sweet.
I have a
but
question.
Now I just bring it up to my office.
When I worked at the Big Pink downtown, across at the parking structure, they have the locked, the big boxes where you could actually rent the space or whatever, and it enclosed it, locked it down. You could never tell there was a bike in there. It was clean. It's just, when you came out to get your stuff and go biking again, that was it.
But they're expensive.
Yeah.
And if you can just take an area in a park, otherwise, and make it a secure area by putting a fence and some kind of card key entry system.
Will this say it has to be monitored?
No.
Well,
Areas that are secure or monitored. Secure or monitored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got the
So I have a
choices
question.
covered and-
Are our current schools meeting the requirements that are in here for high school, middle school, grade school?
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I see the bike rats at the elementary school, and it's not that much.
Yeah, and
Well,
those were
It was-
built
This is going forward.
far enough back that they didn't. Well, even I bet Laurel.
Well,
Woods
Edie
did.
Ridge is pretty new.
Right.
And then at the work session, I asked, how much of the population are we really serving by these amendments? Because I don't think there's much of the population in Sherwood itself that does commuting, but did anybody look into that?
It's kind of hard. I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know how
the
you would.
Metro ones.
Yeah, we don't have those existing mode split numbers. No.
But certainly with
Metro is
bicycling and then that behavior, it's kind of a catch-22, and it's why you provide facilities before people will bike, sometimes before people bike. It's a safety and it's a security issue, and sometimes you build it and people come, and if you don't build it, people simply won't.
Yeah, and we are on we're on the scenic route for Washington County, and we've talked about ways that we can do agritourism for wineries and things like that. And I when I lived in Washington, I would ride my bike out along the vineyards and orchards and stuff out to the places that are just for bikes and stuff. And so we definitely could attract that dynamic. So.
Okay, so did we change it to 25%?
We said 8. What was our final language? 8 or more?
8 or more. If providing more than 8 required bicycle parking spaces, at least 25% of the spaces must be long-term.
Okay.
Okay, just that says more than 8 instead of 8 or more, which is fine with me, but I just want to make sure it's what
More
we
than
want.
8.
I would rather say more than 8.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's just fine. More than 8. That's good.
Can we, when it says locate the space within 100 feet of the entrance, can we say just the building entrance? Or to the fact that it could be either the front or the rear entrance?
100
Well, I think it
feet.
says accessed by the intended users.
Yeah, I mean,
So
are we
it's
assuming
employees'
that it's
interest
just
or-
whatever, any entrance right now? The way it's worded right now, I'm assuming it's.
Well, access.
Because technically, if
public
Target had
versus
their space at the back of the
Yeah.
store, they couldn't do that because their employees come in the front door only,
Correct.
according to the code.
Right.
As long as it's if it's in the building, it could be anywhere in the building as far as I'm concerned, don't you think? Doesn't have to be within
And
100
entry.
feet inside the building. Once you're in the building, you're out of the rain.
Yeah, and entrance.
Yeah, that probably should be outdoor space, just for clarification.
Yeah, within 100 feet of the outdoor space. Yeah, because otherwise,
Okay, yeah,
Oh.
look.
they'd be
yeah.
way out by 99.
So the
outdoor
so
parking
the
space.
space, any place inside the building or within 100 feet, if it's outside.
I think so. Yeah.
Ah,
That's I think.
Because then, as long as you've
100
met
feet
the
of-
covered
100 feet
and
of it,
secure
of the entrance.
and lit, well lit, it could be anywhere in the building, I think.
right.
Yes.
And 100 feet of it, an entrance, not
The entrance.
the entrance, because there could be multiple entrances.
Well, I think it says that's primarily used by the intended people.
use, by the intended user.
Because Target could put it, I don't mean to pick
Okay.
on Target, by the way, but Target could put it in the back alley, which is by an entrance, and then they still have to go around to the front. So I think 100 feet's probably.
Okay.
And
So did you get that change?
So it is locate the space within, allocate outside spaces within 100 feet of the entrance that will be accessed by the intended users.
Yep.
Yes. All right, that's all the code amendment concerns I had. Does anybody else have anything else?
oops, I wrote up this one now.
Questions, comments, concerns, answers?
Are we at the end of that?
We are.
Are we at the end?
We're recommending
Well,
approval.
the only thing I wanted to ask Bob is, I know that it seems like your position is prominently listed several times in the code. This, or at the discretion of the city engineer. This, or at the discretion of the city engineer. So you,
Is that by design?
yeah. So I mean, is that how it's done now? It's like if they don't meet this criteria, if they do, but you still feel like, well, that's not good enough.
Or that wasn't the intent?
That's defensible. That's what I'm getting at. Is this?
Well, part of this is, it goes hand in hand with design variations. There were an exception to the design rule. I'm usually,
Because they have you in here as also being the person to determine proportionality.
true. Yes. Under the standards, if they're going to come up with something different, they're going to have to justify it. It's just not going to be a granted scenario that they come up and they say, well, our development's going to actually make more money if I get a smaller road and put more building product on the area that I normally would have granted you in right-of-way. That doesn't make sense to me. And I have to have some leeway to take into account certain design requirements that are unique. You know, a property that doesn't fit.
Right.
And development really can't work unless we do something, be a little bit flexible. And you're going to see that eventually coming up. I mean, the brownstone things are exactly that.
Right. Yeah.
It's a balancing act. I don't do it in a void, but I definitely don't just grant anything that comes my way. Most of those developments, when they come up, I make them sweat bullets, and I make sure that they do their work.
But this process it seems like it's so entrenched in the TSP. This process is something that is going to stand up at LUBA, for example.
Generally
I
speaking,
mean, we're all
I
saying
would say
if
yes.
Bob says it, that's the law, and we have a way of. You have your slide
Frankly,
rule and your calculator, and
Yeah, I'm less concerned about LUBA than I am about there's a different statute that allows people to challenge conditions that would be deemed arbitrary. And a decision that is just exclusively at the discretion of some person without standards and safeguards could be abused and become discretionary or arbitrary and capricious decision-making. In this case, the way the code and Bob's manual works out is that we have standards, but the design exception process allows for variations from those standards. The design exception process is regulated by the city engineer, administered, I should say, by the city engineer, and has its own internal standards and safeguards to protect against the arbitrary decision making by the city engineer. So
And an appeal process.
and an appeal process, exactly. Those
Right,
are
I saw
the
that too.
safeguards,
Mhm.
right? So that's how, even though the TSP, which is again is a fairly general document, may say you have to follow these standards or is approved by the city engineer. When that then gets implemented through the subsidiary documents, or at the discretion of the city engineer becomes the design exception process in the city's design standards manual. Does that help?
Oh yeah, I have no doubt in his ability to do this well. I have no doubt of that at all. I
It's
just
the next city engineer that we
Right.
don't know.
Well,
It's my
well, no, it
the
just
next-
seemed
the
like
next
it was
city
a
engineer
lot.
is still going to be tied down to what's in this
Right,
manual.
right.
In that the way I've written it is he's not going to get away with, okay, yeah, I see it. He's going to have to document it. He's going to have to follow through. There going to have to be background information provided and a justification that goes with it, a written justification that he signs off on. They have to submit the request. I have to review it. I have to provide a written response to it as to why I'm accepting it and what limitations I'm placing on it.
It just seemed a little bit like let's zone this medium residential, but don't put any apartments on it. Remember that story?
Yes.
So, and the city council said, no, you can't do that. And I just thought, it's not quite like that. I understand that, but, and I like you having the power. I'm okay with that. So,
I like having the option of trying to make something work, but I'm
Right.
very rigid when it comes to the applicability of making a change to a standard. I don't like the changes in standards on an arbitrary basis. There has to be a very, very good reason for it. If it's not supportable, they don't get it.
right.
All right. Any other comments, questions before do we have a motion?
I move the Sherwood Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for PA 1401 Transportation System Plan Update based on the applicant testimony, public testimony received, and the analysis findings and conditions in the staff report with the modifications as discussed. Second?
Is there a second?
I second it.
All right.
Can I
It's
ask-
been
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
No.
Before you Can we have it to a date certain so that we don't have to worry about notice?
Do we know when the council wants to see this? No.
But they're recommending it go to the city council on X date so that we don't then have to notice the city council hearing.
Wouldn't the city council notice it?
We don't usually do it like that. Usually the planning commission recommends that it be heard on a specific night. We can, sure, if we want to.
Do you have that date?
Do the notice.
Is it the
I wasn't
17th?
anticipating, I didn't know if we would be continuing this, and I haven't looked at the city council's docket to know with the budget
Let's
hearings
notice it
coming
again,
up.
because people should notice
It's
it
a big-
again.
What's the noticing requirement other than the 5
We
places?
did use a tentative date within our Gazette notice, and I believe that was,
It's either the 3rd or the 17th.
I think it was June 17th.
But that's a budget.
I think it was June 17th.
Right.
That's the budget.
You want to do that and the TSP on the same night?
You want to do the budget and the TSP on the
Is that
same night?
Robin?
And you thought we had a late
We
night.
still have it tentatively put on for that date. You can always, I mean, I guess it's up to, I'd like to hear what council says. Certainly in the past, there's been times where you've said it will be continued to the next date, but you could put it on. I think that the council's trying not to have a July 1st meeting, so if you don't do it June 17th, it would be July 15th.
Yeah.
But we could also renotice. I just wanted to kind of put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not noticed to individual properties, we're noticing it within the Gazette and the Archer, or the Times. So I think I'd be comfortable just renoticing.
Yeah. And Bob, maybe you want to speak to the grant contract, but the further it gets pushed out, the city loses.
We met our
No,
requirement.
the grant contract, the way we've got it worked out with ODOT right now is the TGM grant, so long as the adoption goes forward, recommendation to the city council.
Oh, there we go.
That is
Under the wire.
suffices, that we've met the requirements of the grant.
In terms of ODOT paying for the consultant team to be here versus the city paying for the consultant team to be here, the date does matter.
Yeah, but he said so long as we get it through the planning commission, they'll accept that as meeting the contract requirements, because the adoption by the city council will not create a problem on them paying that for that work up to that point.
So you're just
If we don't come to council until August, he'll say you held up your end of the bargain, but they're not going to pay for the consultant team to be at council in August.
True, and we'll probably have to cover that.
Yeah. So just be sure you're aware of that.
Would they cover it if you were here June 5th or July 15th? July?
Probably not.
Or is it this fiscal year that they need to have?
They need closure this fiscal year is the understanding.
We would probably have to be there in June because we have to get our final contract materials and invoices to them by July 15th.
So July 1st, if we had a meeting, that would suffice?
Correct.
That would be worth approaching the mayor and city manager. I'm sure we would prefer to save the money.
So, but at this point, we're going to renotice it, so we're not obligated.
Do we need to
motion on the
finish? We need to
floor.
vote,
Yeah,
right?
we just need
You
to
have a
move.
motion and a second.
I was just saying,
I'm
close
sorry.
the motion.
I just want to make sure we're not getting off track.
All right. So
Somebody
since
second
we
it?
are not going to be modifying the motion, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion regarding the recommendation for approval on PA 1401? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Hey, that's not our longest meeting. We've gone long.